across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
There you are. Good afternoon and welcome to Drive Time right here on Talk. I'm Kevin O'Sullivan and I'll be your host for 3 thrilling hours of news, views and topical debate all the way to 7 o'clock. Get on the show, get it off your chest, get on the phone and call me on 0344 499 1000 or you can WhatsApp voice note me on the same number and I promise to play your message out. It is Thursday, May the 7th. Here's what's coming up. Well, it's local elections day, and that means that due to broadcasting rules, we're not allowed to talk about politics. Normal service resumes tomorrow, but there's plenty of other news to get our teeth into today, so let's get it on. More shocking evidence that Britain's welfare madness is spiralling out of control as it is revealed that an astonishing 1.5 million migrants are on benefits and 1 in every 6 universal credit claimants is not a British citizen. In other words, the UK's hard-working taxpayers are funding foreigners. Isn't that special? 0344 499 1000. Meanwhile, more insanity as the French cops finally slash and puncture an illegal dinghy bound for Britain, only to find themselves under investigation for breaching the migrant passengers' human rights. Isn't that special? 0344 499 1000. Also, on today's action-packed show, the school kids being taught that it is their civic duty not to offend others. No, it isn't. And that's a legal fact. Begging the question, why are teachers brainwashing their pupils with inaccurate Be Kind claptrap? 0344 499 1000. Plus, Witherspoon's boss Tim Martin hits back at Ryanair chief Michael O'Leary's demands for an early booze ban for airport terminal passengers who fancy a drink before boarding the plane. Martin says the move would be a big brother assault on freedom of choice and lead to holidaymakers being breathalyzed. I agree with Tim Martin. Whose side are you on? 0344 499 1000. If I want a drink, I should be allowed to have a drink, shouldn't I? So should you. Michael O'Leary, wind your neck in. Also, should we give a rat's backside about the rat virus cruise ship? Sympathy for those who died, of course, but is there any chance of the hantavirus spreading? Is it contagious? Is there any cause for panic? Stay tuned to find out. Also, Trump's latest Iranian peace deal, mass flight cancellations, and the scourge of lazy civil servants. And finally, royal guru Kinsey Schofield with breaking news about Harry and Meghan. All that and so much more, so don't go anywhere. Stick with me right here, right now on Talk, the home of free speech and common sense. Let's spend Thursday afternoon together. And before I go over to my first guest, breaking news about this morning, it's just emerged on the news schedules that Prince Andrew was out for a walk with his dog last night and was attacked by a guy in a black balaclava. It was around the Sandring estate. This guy was apparently sitting in a car and leapt out of the car and tried to attack. Calling him Prince Andrew. Of course, he's not Prince Andrew anymore. He is Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. But even he surely has a right to take his dogs for a walk without being attacked. We'll talk about the security implications of that in just a little while. But first, let's go over to my first guest. He is the leader of the Advance UK Party, Ben Habib. Ben, well, you know today's a very special day that, well, I might as well say goodbye to you now because we can't talk about politics. So we lay off the local elections, but plenty of other things to talk about. Well, let me get your take first on the breaking news today that 1.5 million migrants who've arrived here from abroad are on benefits, and that 1 in every 6 claimant of universal credit is not a British citizen. So, in effect, hard-working British taxpayers are funding foreigners, many of whom arrived here illegally, and many of whom don't work at all. This seems to me to be very, very wrong.
In the report I read, the 1.5 million were foreigners on universal credit, and there were another 600,000 foreigners who weren't on universal credit, but getting benefits through housing support and other things. And the 1.5 million figure, I don't think is a particularly new one. I think we've been aware of that for some time. And the total bill that it estimates that the taxpayer is picking up is in the order of 10 billion a year, which I think is under-egging it by miles. If you were to money it up, I think it's more like 15 billion, just at £10,000 per head per annum, you get to 15 billion. So I think the numbers being put out are under-egging the problem. But the question that needs to be asked is, why are we paying foreigners any benefits at all? If foreigners are in this country, they should be here for one of two reasons. One, because they're working and they're here legally on a visa, or two, they're here with indefinite leave to remain to contribute to our economy. In both categories, there should be a requirement to actually be gainfully employed, not that they can come here, settle down, and leech off the British state. We've lost control, effectively, of the connection between being welcome in our country because you're contributing to the United Kingdom, and therefore you're welcome, and this sort of hijacking of all things commonsensical and saying, well, you're in this country, you're here, no matter how you got here, illegally, on a visa, indefinite leave to remain or whatever, and you don't have to be gainfully employed, and we're going to chuck the largesse of the British state at you. We've moved into that category, and I think that's one of the reasons, Kevin, that we have such a problem protecting our borders and being able to clamp down on foreigners more generally. We are giving them an open ticket on the United Kingdom by chucking these benefits and universal credit at them.
Indeed, and don't forget that when they first arrive, these migrants, these small boat migrants who cross the channel illegally, as we well know only too well, that the first thing we do is sort of basically put them into an expensive hotel, give them free food, free doctors, free dentists, free lawyers and all that. But the other thing that happens, almost within moments of their arrival, we start to give them £50 a week benefits. Immediately. Now, what we're talking about with these 1.5 million people, these are migrants who arrived some time ago and now qualify for full benefits. But let's not forget that in this kind of hamster wheel of insanity, the first thing we do with these people who break our laws and break into our country illegally is say, here's £50 a week, courtesy of hard-working British taxpayers. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And free medical care, free dental care, free food. Yeah. Let's not forget about all of that. And something else that people may not be aware of is that foreigners on benefits have an attribution made towards their pension, so that if you've entered this country and you haven't if you haven't contributed to this country in any shape or form, you've lived off benefits, you are notionally nevertheless deemed to have contributed to the pension pot, and you will even get a pension on the British state. We all bang on about the triple lock or there's a debate on about whether the triple lock needs to be removed or not, because pension costs are out of control, 150 billion a year. Actually, some pensioners in this country are foreigners who've never worked in this country, had benefits paid to them, were notionally declared as having contributed so that they could then get a pension. This is how far we have slipped.
It's just insane, isn't it?
It is insane. We've become a state. We've become basically a welfare state with a small private sector tacked on, trying desperately to keep this ship afloat.
Yeah, we're a welfare system with a country attached. Now, over the channel, just to prove that the insanity that tends to surround the migrant crisis isn't restricted to just Britain. In France, on Sunday, this is astonishing, but it actually happened. Les gendarmes, the French cops, actually stopped a rubber dinghy crossing the channel. It apparently had sort of run aground, so it never really got to sea. So the gendarmes stabbed it with their knives, punctured it, and the 25 migrants on board, of course, were not able to set sail for the promised land, for Britain, the 21-mile journey that lay ahead of them. So they weren't able to do that. You think, well, good. You know, at last the, upwards of £1 billion we've given to the French to stop the boats. They've actually stopped a boat. How about that? Who'd have thought it? Who'd have thunk it? Well, guess what's happened now? A French human rights charity has reported these coppers, and they are now under investigation for infringing the human rights of the 25 migrants who were on board the boat that they punctured. And that's because the boat was in the water. And therefore the French police, according to these do-gooders, this charity, had no right to step in and stop this boat. So these coppers who did the right thing are under investigation for infringing the human rights of these migrants to cross the channel illegally, and their human rights to break into this country illegally. Human rights, human rights, human rights. I think if we got rid of that phrase, and we'd be all right. We'd be the whole world would be a better place.
Yeah, certainly Europe would be a better place, because I think it's mainly Europe that the US is. It's rediscovering its ability to defend itself, but it too was hijacked until recently by this kind of nonsense. I mean, the fact is, we've become accustomed to thinking of human rights through the prism of criminals' interests. And when these people are seeking to launch off French shores into British waters, they are seeking to break the law. Since when is the prevention of the breaking of the law an act that breaches someone's human rights? Next, we'll be saying that if someone tries to break into your property, you mustn't intercept or deter them for fear of injuring them. You must open your door, let them in, and allow them to take whatever it is they wish to take. Otherwise, you're going to breach their human rights. It's setting aside an understanding, the basic understanding that those who seek to do criminal things need to be challenged forcefully, deterred from doing it, and if they persevere, are detained and deported, in our case, if they make it across the channel. And I will go much further. You've heard me say this, Kevin, so many times. We need to develop the will to intercept those boats in the channel, refuse them entry into British territorial waters, which we're entitled to do under the UN Convention of the Law of the Seas. People seeking to enter your territorial waters illegally can be deterred. You have a right to prevent them from coming in and send them back to France. And if, in enforcing our borders, some risks are taken with the lives of those who are seeking to enter our waters illegally, well, that is the risk that they chose to take when they launched off French shores. That is not a risk that we should say we are creating for them. We can't infantilize people to the point where we set aside our own borders, our own country, our own civil society, because we've infantilized them to the point where we think their human rights are more important than our law-abiding citizens' human rights.
Absolutely. And the insanity of what happened on Sunday morning, these coppers puncturing this boat, was it literally hadn't really got off the beach. It was grounded, but you know, the low tide was lapping around it. It was grounded. But this charity has got these cops in trouble because the charity is saying that their human rights were infringed, and they put the lives of these migrants in danger. Their lives were in no danger. So the whole thing is a mad human rights scam, another mad human rights scam. By the way, the charity, the do-gooder charity, is called Utopia 56. I just thought I'd throw that in there. Let's move on, Ben. Now, I've been sort of heroically resisting covering the rat cruise ship. What's it called? The MV Honduras. And there's been 150 passengers on board on this world cruise. 40 of them disembarked at St. Helena, the island of St. Helena, a couple of weeks ago, or it was last weekend, and they've spread around the world. Now, here's the deal. somebody on that boat got this thing called hantavirus, which is a rat virus. Rats catch it and rats die. When humans catch it, apparently it usually dies in humans because it's not a human virus. It needs to be in rats and animals. But it's not always the case. It can make people very sick, but it's very, very rare. And it's in humans, hantavirus is incredibly uncontagious. Your chances of catching it are, next to zero. The only way you'll catch it from another human being who's got it is if you're in sustained close contact with them, which I suppose a cruise ship would provide that close contact. So I guess that's what's going on here. Now, I want to pay full sympathy in respect to the poor 3 people who have died. 40 passengers who disembarked at St Helena have now travelled far and wide. 2 of them are here in Britain, self-isolating. But, you've got the World Health Organization coming on in saying, oh, very alarmed. The cases of hantavirus have gone up from 5 to 8. So what we've got here, in my view, is the seeds of another health scare. Start wearing masks and things like that. There is no basis for that kind of panic whatsoever, and yet you've got the World Health Organization making the same old noises. Pretty soon we'll be told to wear masks and to isolate. There is no cause for alarm. This boat, by the way, was refused permission to dock at Cape Verde, but is now on its way to Tenerife, where the authorities are trying to decide whether or not to let it land. But it just worries me when you see something like this. It's a good headline story, but actually when you look into it, when you dig down deep into it, there's nothing to it. There is no cause for alarm or panic. There is no chance of any kind of epidemic here at all, and yet we've got the same old drumbeat, self-isolate, we're very alarmed, cases have gone up from 5 to 8. Apparently hantavirus was discovered in about 1973, and since then the entire human casualty list numbers around about 150 since 1973. So please, let's not have another health scare panic.
I think what you put your finger on is yet another example of how the precautionary principle, we talked about the precautionary principle is hijacking common sense and personal agency initiative. We talked earlier about how we now live basically in a welfare state where welfare is the predominant activity that we carry out. That state of dependency on the state, people being dependent on the state, creates an aversion to risk because you're always looking to the government to protect you. You're always looking for guidance on how you can be protected. And that principle of protection and always looking to the state for protection has undermined our personal agency, preparedness to take risk, etc. And so whenever we see now even the smallest risk, and as you paint it correctly, I'm sure, Kevin, this is a risk not even...
It's not even a risk, Ben. There's no risk. There's no risk.
It's not even a risk. We still take the precautionary principle to its nth degree because of this state of dependency, inability to think straight. It's one of the reasons I think we were hijacked by COVID, because even though we knew right back in March 2020, we knew it only really affected the elderly and the vulnerable. They were the ones who needed to be protected, and yet we shut the whole country down. All of Europe was shut down. Vast swathes of the world was shut down on the back of what the Chinese response to this virus had been. And we destroyed our economy on the back of that. And people talked back then. I remember the debate back then was, oh, well, would you really put the economy ahead of people's health? Well, I tell you what, if you have a destroyed economy, people's health suffers pretty damn quickly after that. And what we're experiencing now, many of the things we're experiencing now, the difficulties this country has, is on the back of lockdowns and this precautionary principle. We have to be prepared to take risks with ourselves, measured risks, and people have to have the ability to judge those risks themselves and decide what they're going to do. That also, by the way, is at the heart of private enterprise. which has increasingly been set aside in the pursuit of this dependency culture that invades our welfare state.
Agreed, Ben. And I'll tell you what will happen fairly soon. There'll be an announcement about bird flu, avian flu. Be careful. We fear we're on the edge of a global epidemic. They've been saying that now for about 30 years. One day it will actually happen. You never know. But this panic stations syndrome, we ought to be very careful about it. I get it. This is quite an interesting story. These poor people trapped on this boat of hell. But globally, in terms of contagion, in terms of the potential for an epidemic, ignore it. There's no chance whatsoever. Ben, I've got to move on, but it's good to have you on the show. As always, next time we'll talk about politics. I think there might be quite a lot to talk about in the next few days. Looking forward to that. Ben Habib there, the leader of the Advance UK political party. Next up, we're going to talk to William Yarwood about the amount of benefits and welfare we're paying out to foreigners, to migrants, to asylum seekers. Good, isn't it? We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's talk about that story that I discussed with Ben Habib just now, the shocking revelation that 1.5 million migrants are on benefits, and that 1 in every 6 claimant of universal credit. That can be if you're out of work, but it's usually if you're a low income, you might have a job that doesn't pay you very much and you need more. So if you're on universal credit, you're not necessarily out of work, you're not necessarily jobless, you're just in a job that doesn't pay much. Nevertheless, that's benefit. 1 in every 6 claimant for universal credit, it transpires, is not a British citizen. So we are giving billions of pounds probably to foreigners who came, many of whom came here illegally. I don't want to be unkind, but that strikes me as just insane. Let's talk to from the Taxpayers Alliance, William Yarwood. Hello, William.
Good afternoon, Kevin. Thanks for having me on the show.
Always a pleasure. Now, here's the deal. Our current welfare bill is around about £330 billion a year and rising because of the government's failure to bring in the necessary cuts to that enormous bill. It's on its way up to, they predict, 420 billion before too long. Massive amount, unsustainable. We are now paying out more in welfare than we receive in income tax. That is dysfunctional. And today we learned that 1.5 million people who benefit from the benefits system are migrants, and that 1 in 6 claiming universal credit are not British citizens. So we are giving massive amounts of welfare money. Taxpayers are funding welfare payments to foreigners, many of whom came here illegally. This is just barking mad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, controversially, Kev, I think Britain's welfare state should be a safety net for the people who have actually contributed to the country, not an international entitlement
Be
program.
careful what you say, William. That's a bit control.
Oh well, I never like to be controversial.
Yeah, no, but you're right. Sorry, carry on. Just carry on. Sorry.
And yeah, no, this is just another great piece of work from Rob Bates in the Centre for Migration Control, a great friend of mine. And interestingly, the growth has been quite interesting. So about a year ago, there's about 1.3 million foreign nationals claiming universal credit. Now it's 1.5 million. Which just highlights that this number is going up and up and up. And actually, over the last 4 years, Kev, this number has increased by about 44% in the last 4 or 5 years, showing that this trend is only going one way and one way only, which is meaning more foreign nationals are claiming universal credit. And I believe between January 2024 and June 2025, a household with 1 unemployed foreign national, so 1 unemployed foreign national, not a low-wage foreign national, a household with at least 1 unemployed foreign national, those households as a totality received around £10.6 billion in universal credit cash between those date periods, which is the equivalent to about the lifetime taxes of around 8,300 households. So what you're saying earlier with the welfare bill and growing, this is just another element of it, on top of the fact that we don't seem to be able to actually do in-person assessments anymore. You know, people are taking the mickey in regards to PIP with things like anxiety and depression. And you add on to that the growing welfare bill for foreign nationals. You know, we talk about the benefits bill being over £400 billion, but God, you know, if this keeps going the only way, there's only one way, which is up, God knows what that number might be in a few years' time more.
I mean, are there proposals? I've got to be a bit careful discussing politics today, so let's not make this party political. But are there proposals across the board, across the political board, to perhaps, you know, stop foreigners getting welfare, getting benefits, that you have to be British, British citizen to get welfare?
Yes, so the reforms regarding indefinite leave to remain are very interesting because indefinite leave to remain, after 5 years, you essentially get to claim welfare, which of course means that this number is going to go up when we take into account the Boris wave, of course. I mean, I think it's predicted that the Boris wave is going to cost us probably an extra £9-10 billion when, of course, they are able to claim welfare once their indefinite leave to remain is granted. So I think reforms around indefinite leave to remain are very good. I think that extending it from 5 years to 10 years is a good start. And actually, interestingly, in other countries, that's not seen as particularly weird. You know, in the United States, most legal immigrants face a 5-year federal ban before accessing major welfare programs, while illegals get no access to it at all. In Australia, you know, residents rate up to 5 years as well, and temporary visa holders are excluded in totality. And across Europe and in places like Germany, welfare access is much more tied to things like contribution and immigration status, rather than just, your how long you've been in the country effectively. So there's other countries we can learn from, but actually I do think the indefinite leave to remain reforms are a good first step.
Yeah, so the deal now is, I was just saying to Ben Habib, I mean, there's another realm of madness here, because the moment that these migrants arrive, when they come across on a small boat illegally, try to break in our country, you stick them in a hotel, we immediately give them £50 a week benefits. But when do they qualify for full benefits? Is that, as you were just saying, when they get indefinite leave to remain after 5 years at the moment? Is that when they qualify for full benefits?
Yeah, so legal nationals, if they qualify and manage to pass the indefinite leave to remain barrier, after 5 years, they get access to benefits. If you're an asylum seeker, obviously you'd have to go through the process of claiming asylum, have that accepted, and then, of course, then attempt to get indefinite leave to remain. So there's like different stages and steps to it. But I mean, you're right to mention the legal migrant bill. I mean, we at the Taxpayers Alliance earlier this year revealed that actually the cost of adult asylum seeker social care, which is what councils were dealing with, has tripled in the last 5 years. Tripled in the last 5 years, meaning we're spending almost £750 million in 2024-25 on social care for illegal migrants, effectively. And when you think social care, you think old ladies in care homes and things like that. But social care will also include things like translation classes. It will include things like so-called integration classes and the like. And local councils are being forced to pick up that bill because social care is a statutory obligation imposed from Westminster. But that has only grown, Kev. That's only grown because of the failure to stop the boats over the last few years.
It's crazy, William. Good to have you on the show, though, mate. Come on again soon. William Yardwood there, spokesman for the Taxpayers Alliance. Let me know what you think. 1.5 million. Many of them not working. The idea of letting in loads and loads of migrants, that was the original principle, was that they work, and they contribute to the economy, they spend, and the economy grows because of millions of more people living here. The trouble is, it doesn't really work if millions of them don't work, if you see what I mean. So what's happening now is we're letting in all these migrants, and many of them don't work, and we just give them benefits. It's, think about it. So, come to Britain. Here's money for you to live. I mean, where's the sense in that? It's just insane. We will go to break now. When we come back, we'll talk again about, talking of insanity, what happened to the French cops when they tried to stop a migrant's rubber dinghy on the French north coast on Sunday. That next. Stay tuned.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Well, let's talk about that madness on the north coast of France on Sunday morning when les gendarmes finally did their job. They finally tried to stop a boat by puncturing it with their knives. They slashed it, they punctured it. It was unable to set sail for the promised land, as in Britain. 25 migrants stopped from that 21-mile voyage across the English Channel to the south coast of France. Those coppers are now under investigation for infringing the human rights of the migrants on board. Pretty much sums up the insanity that surrounds the migrant crisis, clearly on both sides of the Channel. Let's talk to former Immigration Minister Kevin Foster. Hi, Kevin.
Hi, Kevin. How are you?
I'm good. Now, I've got to ask you to be careful here. We must not be party political today because it's the local elections broadcasting rules. But we can talk about what I would suggest is the insanity in France. So, as I was just explaining, a group of French cops, in return for the more than £1 billion we've now given France to patrol their own beaches and, frankly, so far not really stopped the boats. But in return, Shabana Mahmoud gave them 662 million more quid the other week. They finally, on a French beach on Sunday morning, they finally stopped this boat. They went up to it, they stopped it, they stuck their knives in it, they punctured it, and the 25 migrants on board were thwarted. They were unable to make their 21-mile voyage to the British promised land. Those coppers are now under investigation for allegedly breaching the human rights of those migrants to cross the Channel illegally and break into Britain illegally. They're also accused of threatening the lives, risking the lives of these migrants, which is nonsense because the boat, apparently the dinghy, was grounded. It was just stuck on the sand. So, human rights, it should be a good thing. Are you like me, Kevin? Every time I hear the phrase human rights, or I hear the phrase, he's a human rights lawyer, my heart sinks because you know what's coming next will be something truly mad and insane like this.
Absolutely. And, I'll focus my comments to France today because remember, this is a French beach under French law.
Yeah, you say what you like about France.
Yeah, and we're talking a French investigator. Just to be very clear for anyone watching this, this is nothing to do with British authorities.
No, it's not. No.
This is about France. And, when you look at the footage, to put this into perspective, we're talking about officers are standing in water that, I've seen deeper paddling pools. Literally, they are stood in water that doesn't even really come over their ankle and literally just about a foot or two from the beach rising up. So there is absolutely no prospect that anyone in that boat was going to end up in water that they might actually drown in. So and these were adults, there were plenty of people there. So the idea that this was in any way dangerous or risking life was absolute nonsense. But it's an example of the type of lawfare we see on both sides of the Channel, where people are exaggerating situations, trying to bend law into ridiculous outcomes by saying, for example, in this case, we shouldn't be intercepting the boat when it's at sea and in the water. Okay, but that's really not the case if you're literally just off a beach in water that's no deeper than a paddling pool. So really exaggerate, but it's that all trying to bung things up, create uncertainty, get things into the court. In actual fact, these officers should actually be getting a medal, not being investigated, for actually taking the initiative, getting something done and trying to stop this trade, which ultimately is causing huge issues in the Pas de Calais. The gangs that are organising this trade don't just smuggle people, they also get involved in violent extortion and other forms of smuggling, all of which has brought an absolute nightmare for many residents of the Pas de Calais who are as sick of all this as we are. Yeah,
I couldn't agree with you more. The charity concerned, the do-gooder charity, is called Utopia 56. They filed a report to France's human rights watchdog. That's an organisation called Defender of Rights. And you're right. I mean, they've twisted this. And the reason they've done this, in my view, is just to try to preserve the right, the alleged right of migrants to break into Britain, to go across the channel to do this, you know, because it'll be all that sort of nonsense about they're fleeing war and torture. Well, they're not really, because there's no war and torture in France the last time I looked. So we know what happened. This dinghy had run aground, basically. And this charity is saying the actions of these officers risked the lives of the migrants on board. It just did not. This is just playing with the facts to make a political point, isn't it?
Yeah, it's you're looking at the footage. You know, people were not suddenly ending up in water that actually even came up to their knees, let alone, or their ankles, let alone, you know, anywhere that would offer a very short walk back to the beach and shore, literally a couple of steps. But what this is about, Kevin, is about bunging up the process. It's about making it harder for law enforcement to intervene, worried that they might end up under some form of investigation. You know, this is what lawfare is about. It's not about protecting anything sensible. It's not even actually about some of their rights as such. It's about bunging up the process, making it hard to do anything, and then allowing this trade to continue. And there is some real questions, I'm going to say for French politicians more than our own, about allowing some of these groups to operate in the Pas de Calais, effectively facilitating criminal behaviour, who are now making what are quite clearly exaggerated complaints and telling lies at the end of the day in doing so. What are they going to do about some of this? And also, ultimately, for some of the people who are deluded enough to be supporting some of these charities, you know, some real questions about what it is they think they are achieving at the moment. Because we've seen deaths in the Channel again this year. We're seeing this type of behaviour. And ultimately, you know, it is about trying to destabilise, perhaps for political objectives or other objectives, rather than doing anything to help them. Because as you say, you know, who needs to flee war or persecution in France?
Yeah, last time I looked, there's no war and there's no torture in France. If you were still the immigration minister, Kevin, would you be concerned about a story that I just covered, that turns out 1.5 million people on benefits in this country are migrants. They're foreigners. And 1 in 6 claimants of universal credit are not British citizens. Now, if you were still immigration minister, not wishing to tell you how to do your job, but if I were you, I would be moving to stop that, because that is part of what attracts these migrants to break our laws, to break into this country, because when they get here, we give them the earth. We've got to stop being so generous to these people. And 1.5 million foreigners on benefits is extremely expensive, adding to our already obscene, dysfunctional, unsustainable welfare bill.
Yeah, it must be noted, actually, Kevin, one of the biggest things to stop in relation to that bill we did was to end free movement with the EU, because actually the biggest cohort of that 1.5 million are people who arrived in the time of free movement. That's prior to 2020, when we've just come out of the EU and we still had free movement applied. I think it's about 770,000 at last count are in that cohort. So that has already ended. And there's a small subset of Irish citizens as well. But there is a concern if we see larger numbers going onto the welfare system, and particularly where, as I say, unlike with the EU, at least there was some reciprocity, i.e. there are some British citizens in Europe who receive support from the country that they've been living in for some time if they were there before we left the EU. It has to be clear a lot of that has ended now. But there's certainly a discussion to be had about, one, how our welfare system operates, certainly about removing the incentives in terms of those who arrive by small boat. But as we've touched on before, I think when we discussed around Siobhan Mahmood saying she was going to take away support from those who've claimed asylum, you actually have to decide, what are you going to do next? Because if you're just going to leave people lying around the country, that's where, for example, Australia and the US have made a difference, is they didn't just remove support, they then looked to remove the person out of their country who's arrived illegally. And we can now look and see, for example, the southern US border saw record low number of crossings last year. Well, that's clearly not the case of our border in the Channel. So there are things that can be done. It's a concern, but there's just a little caveat we have to have there. about the fact that some of it relates back to our time in the European Union. That's quite a chunk of it. And that would be, unless you're prepared to alter the treaties, which also protects some British citizens, Europe would be difficult to tackle. But the rest of it is certainly up for debate.
Yeah, it certainly should be. And next time we will debate it properly when we can talk about politics, Kevin. But really good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for your time. That's Kevin Foster, former Immigration Minister. Let me know what you think about this. Human rights, is like I said to Kev just now, right? Every time somebody said, well, human rights, or it's a human rights lawyer, you just know what's coming next will be insane. Human rights seems to be the protector of madness. You know, they're always pursuing crazy causes, you know, like, oh, the human rights of these migrants on that small boat were infringed. No, they weren't. They absolutely were not. You know, a common sense situation is turned crazy by human rights lawyers, by human rights campaigners. These cops do their job. They try to stop a boat crossing the channel illegally. These migrants putting their own lives at risk if they did so. They do this, and here come the human rights mob saying, oh, you've infringed their rights, and turning it into something crazy. A common sense situation turned into something mad by the human rights racket. Aren't you sick of it? 0344 499 1000. Next up, we're going to talk to an education expert on an extraordinary story. Kids, it turns out, GCSE kids are being taught that it is, by teachers, that it is their civic duty not to offend others. It isn't. It isn't their civic duty not to offend others. That's factually inaccurate. So I would ask, or that begs the question if you ask me, why are teachers brainwashing kids, school pupils, with inaccurate be kind claptrap? Got to stop, hasn't it? 0344 499 1000. We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I guess this is a story about what schools should be about. What should they be doing in terms of educating children? You know, it's not just about, you know, your 2 times table and the alphabet and, you know, Janet and John and all that kind of stuff. It is about, there should be some cultural training as well. But it looks as if some schools have gone way over the top, because a GCSE textbook is teaching pupils to use freedom of speech but not to offend. It is teaching them that it is their civic duty not to offend others. So freedom of speech is great, but if you start offending people, then your freedom of speech is cancelled. That's not true. It's inaccurate. So basically, these kids, I would suggest, are being brainwashed by teachers spewing "Be kind, claptrap." Let's talk to the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education, retired head teacher Chris McGovern. Chris, in your view, I mean, this seems to me to be very wrong. I mean, I have no problem with schools and teachers doing a little bit more than just teaching maths and English, but telling them, oh, freedom of speech is a very good thing, but you have to draw the line at being offensive. They're being told that to be inoffensive is their civic duty. They must not offend others. That is their civic duty. That is just not true. This is brainwashing. Be kind, claptrap, to be honest with you, don't you think?
Well, you're absolutely right. The thing is, Kevin, as part of the national curriculum, children have to, in the secondary school, children have to be taught citizenship, and that's coming into primary school next year or next year or 2 as well. So that's, in a way, a good thing. How does Parliament work, democracy and so forth? But what's happening here is this compulsory curriculum in citizenship has been captured by various people, by various woke fanatics. I mean, we're talking here about a textbook which prepares 16-year-olds for an exam, GCSE in citizenship. The book is for the Pearson edXL board. Now, that's a private board. Its overall profit last year was £614 million. So there's money to be made out of this, Kevin. A lot of money to be made out of this.
Follow the money every time.
Follow the money. Now, it's bad because what's happening here, we have a promotion of freedom of speech as a theory, but of course freedom of speech means nothing if you can't actually speak freely, which is what teachers are promoting. You mustn't offend anybody. It's even worse than that, actually. I've seen worse than that. Look, we've had a lot in recent days about anti-Semitism. I can recall, as a teacher, seeing a model exam question sent out to schools which asked children to draft a speech supporting the massacre of Israeli athletes in the 1972 Olympic Games. That's the sort of stuff going on. So you think it's bad, Kevin? It's a lot worse than you know, and only it's a secret garden, and we don't know what's going on. Some of us don't.
Toby Young, the chief of the Free Speech Union, his quote on this, which I think is rather good, he said, "If children are being taught in school that the right to free speech does not include the right to be offensive, God help us." That is what they're being taught. As I say, that's inaccurate. I remember Merseyside Police a few years back. They had a big poster campaign. Literally, this was the police saying to be offensive is an offence. They were told, actually, it's not. Now, you know, what I would say to kids is, listen, I don't want to give you a charter to go around being rude to everyone. I'm not condoning offending anyone just for the sake of it, but as a matter of legal principle, you should know it is not prohibited for you to be offensive. That's what kids should be told.
Absolutely, and I'm very pleased to see that Lord Young is saying that, because I called him Toby. He was one of my pupils many years ago.
Was he? Was he?
Was indeed. So he learnt a bit.
Little
from me,
Toby's done well, hasn't he?
He's done well. His dad, and his dad was a great fighter for liberty, supported me. So look, yeah, I mean, this is a real problem, because what's happening here is within the profession, teachers are signed up to this wokeism, and of course they're not going to defend free speech unless it suits their ideas. As part of this textbook as well, it also says that if you have toilets for boys and girls, that's discriminatory, so you can't have that either.
It says that. It says that.
The same book says that, yeah, and that's reported in the press today. So the problem is here, we can't get inside most people can't get inside the classroom. We don't know a lot of the time what teachers are doing behind closed doors. Well, I know what they're doing because I've taught for 35 years, and they're promoting a woke agenda, and it's a fascist agenda. It doesn't brook any complaints from you or anybody else. We're going to teach this. Don't be offensive. We are good people. We are the best people, and the path to hell is paved with good intentions. These people think they're doing the right thing, but actually they're closing down debates, and they're closing down free thinking, and they're also brainwashing our kids. It's a disaster.
And just generally, Chris, I've got a quote from the Department of Education, which I won't bore you with. I'll do that after we've parted company. But generally, do we have a problem? I mean, I sense we have a huge problem because teachers do tend to be very left-wing. They tend to be woke. And I think they are brainwashing generations of children. I really do. We have a problem there, don't you think?
We have a problem, and the teachers are also the problem because they're brainwashed. You won't become a teacher today. You won't get past the front door as an interview for a trainee teacher unless you sign up for the woke agenda. You've got no chance of being a teacher. You'd never be a teacher. You wouldn't get anywhere near the classroom. They wouldn't have you.
I'm too thick, actually, Chris, so there are other reasons why I couldn't do it, but I take your point. I wouldn't be suitable. I haven't got the right kind of outlook on life. I mean...
But we need real people who've been... And look, I've done loads of jobs in my life, as well as being a teacher. We need teachers who have been in the outside world, who've seen other things. But no, it's a very conformist organisation. It's very authoritarian. You won't get through the front door of a teacher training college unless you sign up for the woke agenda. We've got a problem.
We certainly do. Chris, it's great to have you on the show. I always enjoy our conversations. Thank you so much. Chris McGovern there, boss of the Campaign for Real Education. I'll just read this statement from the Department of Education. A spokesman said, teaching children a range of viewpoints is vital, but our impartial guidance is clear that all materials used by schools must be accurate, age-appropriate, and teachers must provide a balanced presentation of views where political issues are covered. Schools are free to include a full range of issues, ideas and materials in their curriculum, including where they are challenging or controversial, subject to their obligations to ensure political balance. As an independent organisation, it is up to Pearson and Excel to decide on the content of their materials. Well, are those materials appropriate? That's the question. That's what the Department of Education say. We're going to go to break now. We're going to go to the news. After the news, we're going to be joined by the brilliant Brendan O'Neill to go through some of the big stories of the day. So you don't want to miss that. Stay tuned.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. In a little while, we're going to talk to Di Davis, who used to be head of Royal Security for the police. We need to talk about what happened to former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, out walking his dog last night. Apparently, a guy in a black balaclava attacked him, got out of a car and attacked him. He's been arrested. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is okay. But perhaps there's a security issue. It was all around the Sandringham estate, where, of course, Andrew now lives. I'm assuming he was outside the security walls of the estate. But we'll talk to Di and ask him what he thinks about the security implications there, because, of course, all of us have the utmost contempt for that awful oaf, Andrew. But, you know, his personal safety we should seek to secure, should we not? We'll ask about that in a little while. First up, though, well, let's go over to my next guest, the excellent chief political writer at Spiked Online, Brendan O'Neill. Hi, Brendan.
Hi, Kevin. How's it going?
All right, it's good. You know, it's a special day, so we have to be sort of reasonably apolitical. Mustn't refer to the local elections. So first of all, let me ask you about this rat cruise ship. What worries me about this is we seem to have unfolding before our very eyes the anatomy of another health crisis, almost as if it's COVID. The narrative around it is, oh, there's been 5 cases, we're monitoring this closely, the World Health Organization holding press conferences, etc., etc., etc. Now, I don't want to in any way minimise the tragedy of the 3 people who've died or the awful ordeal of the 4 people who left on that ship. But this is not a health crisis. Hantavirus is almost uncontagious. The chances of this becoming an epidemic are literally 0. And yet, the whole world seems to be focused on this boat. Britain is obsessed with it, as if it's sailing towards Tenerife now, but as if we're not careful soon, we're all going to die of rat virus. It's just that the COVID crisis seems to have recalibrated us and hardwired us to be in this constant mode of fear of some new epidemic that's going to kill us all. COVID's got a lot to answer for, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I really agree with that. You know, we seem to have this apocalyptic mindset these days, not only in relation to contagious diseases, but also in relation to climate change, in relation to the Iran war, which we were told would be World War III. Everything has to be understood as this terrible apocalypse that might wipe out humankind or at least cause us a lot of problems. And that's not a very useful way to understand the problems that we face, because it makes people feel scared. It makes them feel unsure about the world. It just isolates people. And we're seeing exactly that script being played out in parts of the media in relation to this cruise ship. As you say, this is a virus that is incredibly difficult to contract. When I first read about this story, I did worry myself. But then when I read about how difficult it is to spread this disease, I was a bit more relieved. But yeah, you know, it's very serious. 3 people have died. That is a great tragedy. But in the pre-COVID era, I don't think this would have been dominating the headlines in the way that it is now. I think you're absolutely right. COVID kind of recalibrated our minds, made us even more susceptible to apocalyptic stories. And that's how this one's been treated, which I think is wrong.
Yeah, the World Health Organization was sort of being alarmist about the fact that cases have risen to 5. To be fair to the WHO, they are trying to stress that, you know, there's no chance of an epidemic and people should not panic. But their very involvement tends to lead to panic because of their deep involvement and frankly their fanning of the flames of the world COVID crisis. So there is your problem, and I'll tell you, I'll have a bet with you now. I don't know if you're a gambling man, Brendan, but I'll bet you 5p that within a few days there will be a warning about bird flu, avian flu. They love that, the World Health Organization, and they've been warning us about bird flu now for, I think, 20 years. And one day, that global epidemic that they threaten us with every year might actually happen.
You know, the thing that I'm worried about is not this new virus. You know, I should say, touch wood, that it won't spread. And it's been predicted, as you say, including by the WHO, that it won't spread. But it's not the virus I'm scared of. It's society's reaction to virus.
Yes.
That's the thing that gets me panicked. Because when I think back to the COVID era, when I think back to March 2020 and April 2020 and those months in which we were locked down, I mean, that's what's really scary. The speed with which our civil liberties were suspended, democracy was put on hold, everyone was shut into their homes, people were phoning to squeal on their neighbors if they went out for more than one walk a day. There was yellow tape around park benches to stop you from sitting down. You know, there's one story that everyone forgets this story, but there's a lake up somewhere in the Lake District that the local police dyed black with literal ink in order to stop people, discourage people from going to visit it. We lost our minds during COVID. We turned into an authoritarian state, and it was incredibly bad for the economy, incredibly bad for kids' education, especially working class kids, and it still is having lingering effects. So panic is sometimes more dangerous than the thing itself. And I think that's probably true about this new virus.
Yeah, we've got to be careful. Do you remember down in Wales with old Kim Jim Drakeford, who really turned Wales into the kind of hermit kingdom, no one allowed in, no one allowed out. And do you remember they put these huge sort of tapes across to stop people getting at magazines and newspapers in newsagents? Do you remember that?
Yeah, so you could buy your food and stuff, but you couldn't buy a magazine. That was too much of a treat. Or you know, remember when we used to go to the pub and you had to have a Scotch egg or a meal? I went to a pub once after the lockdown was easing, and every table had uneaten meals on them because people just wanted a pint.
Yeah.
But you know, people forget all of this because there is such a thing as COVID amnesia. Quite understandably, people want to put that period out of their minds. But it is worth reminding us how thin the line is between civilization and lunacy, and we shouldn't let that line be crossed again.
Yeah, I remember because I was one of the few people, because of broadcasting, we actually had to come in. So we were all coming to work, and when they were beginning to relax some of the rules, a few of us went for a pint down the road. Quite a treat that you could actually have a pint, but you weren't allowed into the pub.
Yeah.
The pub was on one side of the road. We weren't allowed to cross the road. We could stand on the pavement across the road. We could phone the barman and ask for 4 pints. And he would phone us back. And one person was allowed to go get the tray, which he'd leave, shut the window, bring the pint back. We collectively went insane. We really, really did. And when you see this hantavirus saga, it just worries you that we slip back into sort of COVID crisis mode way too easily. A quick thought, actually, while we're on the topic, Brendan. Your thoughts on the COVID inquiry, which I think was coming in at something like about £170,000 a day. There's about 300 people work there. And of course, it's great omission. It said this at the beginning. What we're not going to investigate is whether or not we should have ever locked down, whether or not lockdowns work, because we believe they do work. Therefore, that inquiry is not probing the only thing that matters. Now, I say, and I'm not alone, I say it is quite logically obvious that lockdowns did not work, because we'd have a lockdown and, you know, after a couple of weeks ago, oh, look at the death rate's gone right down. And 3 weeks, oh, we can open up again. So we'd have a lockdown, death rate down, open up, week later, death rate right back up, proving that lockdown didn't work.
Yeah.
So then we'd have another lockdown, same syndrome, death rate goes down, open up, and the death rate returns. So there you have it. Lockdowns did not work, and yet the COVID inquiry will not look into that. What's the point?
A COVID inquiry that doesn't look into the question of lockdown is not worth the paper it's written on. It's completely ridiculous. And I agree with you. I was a lockdown skeptic from very early on. And if you look at countries that didn't lock down, or at least didn't lock down as severely as we did, like Sweden, for example, and certain states in America, They didn't fare any worse, and in some cases they fared even better. But, we made that catastrophic error where we failed to lock down old people's homes, which is where it posed a real threat to life. And in fact, it ran riot in some of those places, and lots of people died as a consequence. But we did lock down healthy young people. We stopped kids from going to school. We stopped teenagers from going out. We stopped people in their 20s from going to work, from socializing. So we didn't lock down the vulnerable, and we did lock down the young. It was a psychotic decision, and I still think we need a reckoning with why that decision was made, but we're not going to get that at this inquiry.
At great expense, we're going to learn nothing of any use whatsoever. It's the greatest folly of public wasted money that I've ever seen. It is such a joke. About 300 people working there, 170 grand a day, all for nothing. It's all pointless, unbelievable. Listen, I'd be interested to get your take on this story. Quite alarming, I think. School kids, they now have to do citizenship as a course. That's not a bad idea. They are being taught on this course, GCSE kids, that freedom of speech is okay, but you mustn't use it to offend people. So they say that freedom of speech should stop at the point that you offend people. In other words, these kids are being told that it is their civic duty not to offend others. Well, it isn't their civic duty not to offend others, and there is no obligation on anyone not to offend anyone else. These kids are being taught something that is inaccurate and brainwashing, I would suggest.
And I'd go even further. I think it's bad for them. I think it's bad for their mental, moral, spiritual health if they are being taught that it's bad to feel offended or to give offense, because that is just categorically untrue. Part of living in a free society, a pluralist society where there are all sorts of beliefs, all sorts of ideas, part of living in that society is that you will very often feel offended. And that's good. It's good for you. It keeps you on your toes. It makes you know that there are different opinions. It makes you sharpen your own opinions because you have to clash with other people. Feeling offended is actually a good thing rather than a bad thing. So they're being taught a lie. But, it's another example of how school kids are being taught essentially to turn their backs on the history of this country, because Britain did so much over the centuries to guarantee the modern idea of freedom of speech. Go right back to John Milton in the 1640s, right through to John Stuart Mill in the 1830s. These are the people who built the modern idea of freedom of speech, and their view of freedom of speech was that everyone should be allowed to express themselves and everyone else should be allowed to make up their minds about what was said. That's how freedom works. We should all be free to speak and everyone else should be free to listen. But kids now are being taught the exact opposite. They'll then go to university, there'll be a safe space if they want to hide away from difficult ideas, and then they'll go out into society and they won't be prepared for the fact that they live in a society where people disagree with them. So we're actually going to harm them in the long run. It's a really bad idea.
Yeah, they are actually being taught that the right to free speech, freedom of speech, does not include the right to be offensive. As I say, first of all, as you say, that's pernicious, that's bad for kids, but it's also hopelessly inaccurate. They're being taught something that's a lie.
Yeah. It's completely untrue. Freedom of speech absolutely includes the right to be offensive. And, people say hate speech isn't freedom of speech. Yes, it is. This is the other problem that we have, because so much now is collapsed under the title of hate speech. So much is called offensive. So, for example, there are some trans activists who find it offensive when J.K. Rowling says that men aren't women. But all she's doing is expressing a biological truth that everyone in history knew until about 5 years ago. So much is now redefined as offense, redefined as bigotry, redefined as hate speech. Perfectly normal ideas are being redefined as hateful. And that means that we're going to have a new generation that won't even be able to hear, never mind genuinely controversial ideas, they won't even be able to hear perfectly normal ideas without running for the safe space. Freedom of speech, absolutely. It's the central component of freedom of speech is the right to give offence. And unless kids are taught that, this society is going to be in trouble in the long run.
I think you're exactly right. Before you go, Brendan, we can talk about this in general terms, because the migrant crisis is certainly not just the fault of this government. It's certainly the fault of the last Tory government as well. So it's an all-round problem caused by the political class, I would suggest. But a story out today that 1.5 million people who are on benefits are migrants. There are 1.5 million migrants who are on benefits, and that 1 in every 6 universal credit claimant is not a British citizen. In general terms, whoever our government is going forward, haven't we got to think about not giving benefits to people who aren't British?
We really do. We really do. And it is not a bad thing to say to people who come to this country that if you can't look after yourself, then you might need to go home. And I say that my parents are immigrants. They came over from Ireland in 1970. If they hadn't found work, they would have been on the first boat home. What else would they have done? Sat around on their backsides doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs? They would have left the country. Thankfully, they did find work, and they contributed enormously to this society, and I'm quite proud of them for doing so. This idea that we should pay benefits to people who aren't born here, or who haven't contributed to the national pot, or who aren't really native Britons in that sense, it is completely pernicious, and it's completely wrong. You know, people up and down this country are so angry about the issue of out of control immigration, our broken borders, the migrant hotel crisis, the fact that so many crimes now, including sexual crimes, are being committed by men from overseas who we seem to have no control over. And of course, the absolute scandal of handing out our hard-earned money to people who aren't from this country. All of it adds up to an absolute shocking state of affairs. And I actually think the migrant crisis is the big issue of our time, and no party will be taken seriously unless they can get a handle on it.
Absolutely right. I mean, it is statistically, according to polls, the issue that is foremost in people's minds. These Westminster bubble boys and girls, they like to go around saying, oh, it's the economy, it's cost of living. Well, that's because they don't want to admit that the real crisis is the migrant crisis, because they don't seem to be able to come up with any way to deal with that or tackle it at all. Last point to you, Brendan, if you will. Again, let's try not to be political, but let's try to be dismayed by this. The problem of anti-Semitism. Police are now investigating. This happened yesterday, I do believe. Jewish schoolboys waiting for a bus in North London near Hendon had to run for their lives when a car suddenly charged towards them, leapt up the pavement and drove towards them at great speed. This looks like another serious anti-Semitic incident. This is spiralling out of control, isn't it?
It really is. And I think we are heading into very dark territory if we don't get a handle on this. We've seen violent attacks on Jews at synagogues. We've seen the firebombing of synagogues. We've seen the burning of the ambulances in Golders Green. We've seen stabbings. And now this latest incident. It's relentless. And the silence of the so-called anti-racists is actually sickening. And I think what we can see quite clearly now is that the past 2.5 years, the carnival of hatred that we've seen for the Jewish state on our streets, where you've had the Islamo left marching every other weekend to say they hate the Jewish state, they hate Zionists, every Zionist is scum. They have hung a target sign around the necks of British Jews, because most British Jews identify as Zionists, they identify with Israel, they love the Jewish homeland. So the more you demonize the Jewish state, the more you endanger Jewish people. That is so clear now. We need to get a handle on this as a matter of priority.
Totally agree. And I'd like to get across the message to quite a few people in this country, millions of people in this country, to call me or you, Brennan, a Zionist. It's not an insult. It's not an insult. It's not a nasty word. It's unbelievable. The anti-Semitism problem is reaching crisis point. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much, Brendan. Fantastic 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Brendan O'Neill, the excellent chief political writer at Spiked Online. We're sort of carefully avoiding pointing the finger at anybody because we have to be very apolitical, unpolitical today, because it is the local elections. They are going on as we speak, and we must not be seen to influence the way you or anyone else votes. So that's why we're being so careful. But that doesn't mean to say we can't discuss important issues, certainly in general terms. We're just not particularly blaming anyone today. Next up, we're going to talk about Prince Andrew, this extraordinary incident last night. He was taking his dog for a walk near Sandringham. Guy leaps out of a car wearing a black balaclava and attacks him. Now, he's okay. The guy was arrested. Apparently, he had weapons on him or something. So I think we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about security for that guy, Andrew Mountbatten. I keep calling him Prince Andrew. Of course, he isn't that. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. We'll talk to Di Davis. He used to be head of Royal Security at Scotland Yard. We'll talk to Di next. Stay tuned.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
I did announce that we're going to be talking about Prince Andrew, this awful incident where he's been attacked by a guy in a black balaclava while walking his dog around the Sandringham estate. But I'm afraid I was drinking very early this morning, so I'm a bit out of sorts. So we're doing that in a little bit. What we're going to do now is discuss drinking early at airports. You will remember that yesterday the Ryanair chief, Michael O'Leary, he demanded that passengers are restricted from how much they drink, particularly early in the morning. You know, if you're on a flight at 7 in the morning, a lot of people, because it's the airport, they're in holiday mode, they have a couple of drinks. Well, Michael O'Leary says, well, you know, the trouble is there's too many people getting on planes that are absolutely drunk as skunks, and we're having to land too many planes in emergency circumstances because of these heavily drunk passengers. So he says, oh, there should be a 2-pint ban or a 2-pint limit. Nobody drunk should be allowed on planes. Well, I just say, well, no, it's just illiberal. You know, freedom of choice. Go away. Wind your neck in, Mr. O'Leary. Tim Martin, the boss of Wetherspoons, the pub chain, has backed me today. He said, no, this is Big Brother restrictions, and it will lead to passengers being breathalyzed at airports before they're allowed onto aeroplanes. You don't want to see any of that. I'm not condoning drunkenness on planes or at airports, but I do not want more rules and regulations and laws, frankly, about anything, but certainly not about having a couple of pints in the airport terminal before you board a plane, even if it is 6 a.m. Let's talk to comedian Paul Cox. Hi, Paul. I'm right, aren't I?
You are, Kevin. I mean, I can't remember a time you've ever been wrong. So,
of course, yeah. You don't have to say I'm right because I always am. Yes.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure all of the listeners and viewers agree with that. But look, I mean, look, this I can understand. Look, let's look at it from two angles. From Ryanair's perspective, if they've got drunk passengers come on, I guess it's a very difficult issue to manage. But that's not everybody else's problem, is it? It's a minority. And to be fair, I'm not a great flyer, and if you're going to be shot through the air in a metal tube at 700 miles an hour, you might want a couple of drinks just to ease the nerves a little. I'm not a big drinker, actually. I'm not one to get... I don't think I've ever had a 6 a.m. pint at the airport to get on a plane, but I would never deny anybody else the right to do that. And actually, Wetherspoons, 2/3 of their sales in airports are actually on food rather than drink. So Wetherspoons aren't the problem. They're often pointed out as the problem, because that's where everybody heads, because that's where you get the most reasonable pint. So they go there, but what they often go there for is, the old bacon and eggs.
That as well. But I tell you, I mean, I've been on a couple of these stag do things, and I really can't face a pint at 6 in the morning. The last one I went a few years back. I'm a bit past the stag do phase of my life now, but a few years back I went on one. I think it was Gatwick. Were we at Gatwick? It might have been Gatwick or Heathrow. Anyway, all these lads go, "Do you want a pint? Do you want a pint?" I thought, it's 6:15 in the morning. I don't want a pint. I have a glass of wine. I'm thinking, oh God, I can't fancy a glass. So it was like a volume thing. So in the end I said, all right, I'll have a brandy. So I'm standing there at 6 in the morning drinking brandy and thinking, what am I doing? But that isn't the point. This is an issue of freedom of choice. And you're right, Paul, to bring in this restriction on how much you can drink, this booze ban, would be to punish the vast majority for the irresponsibility of the tiny minority. Now, people are saying, well, Ryanair should check whether or not their passengers are drunk before they let them on board. That can be difficult. Just because someone's steaming drunk, it doesn't necessarily show. It's not necessarily obvious. And as Tim Martin said, well, that could lead to passengers being breathalyzed before they go on planes, and they don't want that. And in fairness to Tim Martin, people could say, oh, well, he would say that because he wants people to drink in his pubs before they get on the plane, but he is a long-time campaigner for freedom. So I don't think he's just talking in business terms. He's talking in philosophical terms as well, and I'm with Tim.
Yeah, look, he did go to the trouble once this story broke a day or so ago to go and ask his team to do that research because he wanted to know. But I think even if it had come back and said it was the opposite statistic, that 2/3 by drink and 1/3 by food, Tim would have still stood by and said, look, this is a freedom issue.
It is.
This is not an issue about restricting people. It's about speech. What we want. When it comes to stuff like this, I'm a libertarian. I don't want governments or authorities to get involved. The only person who should get breathalyzed going onto a plane is, frankly, the pilot.
The pilot, yeah. I'll go for that.
If they're drunk, then I've maybe got an issue with them being in Wetherspoons. And by the way, the picture of you stood in a pub at 6 a.m. with a brandy is very on brand, Kevin. I wouldn't have been, if anyone had walked past at that point and said, "That's Kevin O'Sullivan," of course it is. He's got a brandy.
6 a.m. No, but you're exactly right, Paul. This is Great Britain. This is a free democracy, and it's about freedom of choice. And I think almost universally we should resist any move to increase our already massive number of laws, rules, regulations. So, Michael O'Leary, wind your neck in, deal with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Look, like I said right at the beginning of this, I kind of understand their problem, but it's not our problem.
Yeah.
It's his problem. If you're going, you know what, even if you have had a couple too many drinks, it doesn't mean that you're going to cause a problem. Yeah. We don't tar everybody with the same brush. You might have had 5 or 6 pints and have a nice little sleep for 4 hours. That's perfectly acceptable. You're not causing anybody any trouble as long as you can walk onto the plane. But even if you can't, if you've got 16 mates helping you get on and they tuck you in the corner, it's all part of the story, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think there could be people watching this that are much like us, that are libertarian when it comes to this sort of stuff, that might have had experiences of like very bad drunken people on planes, and they could be thinking twice about this. But I would ask them just to think, should that mean that everybody can't have fun? I don't think so.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. It's like, I like the idea of saying to someone, God, I was absolutely appalled. There was a drunk on the plane. What's the big deal? One drunk? Well, yeah, it was the pilot. Anyway, Paul, good to talk to you, mate. We'll talk again soon. Paul Cox, their comedian. What do you think, folks? Is Michael O'Leary going too far? You know, I don't want any more rules and regulations. Do you? Yes, nobody's condoning drunkenness on planes, but we have a right to have a beer in the morning, don't we? 03444 991,000. Are you worried about the rat virus ship? Are you worried about that? Or do you think the world has gone into crazy COVID panic mode? 03444 499 1000. Next up, we will talk about Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. See, I managed not to call him Prince Andrew. First time in the show. Andrew Mountbatten Windsor and this terrible incident when somebody attacked him while he was walking his dog. I don't have much time for Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, but even he has a right to walk his dog in peace, does he not? We'll talk about that next. Stay tuned.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's talk about Prince Andrew. Last night he was walking his dog near the Sandringham estate when this was 7:30 last night. When a guy who was in a car leapt out, made his way towards the former Duke of York, shouting at him, apparently wearing a black balaclava. He was arrested, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I called him Prince Andrew again, didn't I? Mr. Mountbatten Windsor was fine, he was okay, but quite a frightening incident. Let's talk to former head of Royal Protection, Di Davis. Welcome, Di.
Hello, good afternoon, Kevin.
Now, here's the deal. Because of his fall from grace, the former Prince Andrew, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, I'm pretty certain has had all of his official security protection stripped away. He doesn't have this anymore. Last night he was with a private security guard, a private security detail. I believe the King pays for that. But in the light of this incident, you know, is it time to perhaps think about... I mean, I've got no time for Prince Andrew or Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. I'm sure you haven't either, Di, but... you know, he is a very prominent figure. Do we have to think about restoring some official security to this guy, do you think?
The simple answer is no. I think the current security structure and system at Sandringham is more than adequate for this gentleman. There's 20,000 acres that he could walk among. He doesn't have to go near the public, and perhaps he'd be wise to stay away from those routes where the public can go to. Those are gentlemen looking after him now are, as I understand it, ex-royalty protection officers and ex-military. So I think they're as capable as anyone, and I think they did the right thing. They didn't confront him. They quickly got him into a car and drove away. And the police, again, Norfolk police work very closely for obvious reasons with Sandringham. They have a direct line, and I suspect a direct dial, and the man was arrested, as it should be. I think he was probably fixated. What you may or may not know, since 2012, there's been nearly 1,000 reported incidents to this unit, which was set up in 2006 to monitor and actually try and deal with those who are fixated and psychologically and pathologically determined to go at public figures. And the vast majority of that are the royal family, and it goes back centuries. It's always been a fear and has been acted on many, many times, which the vast majority of the public know very little about. But I can assure you it is very common in protecting the royals.
I don't know what Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has been told or advised, but it strikes me we could be looking at a pattern of behaviour situation here, insofar as this guy who was arrested, he was arrested on suspicion of a public order offence, and here's the worrying bit, possession of an offensive weapon. It looks as if he was waiting for Prince Andrew, for Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Now, perhaps Andrew Mountbatten Windsor has some routine where he walks his dogs on this route. As you suggested, Di, perhaps it's time to talk to this man, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, say, listen, don't do the same things all the time, and if you must take your dogs for a walk, why not do it within the grounds and the walls, the security of the Sandringham estate? Don't walk outside, you idiot.
Well, that would be sensible by any definition. And again, I would hope that those advising him at every level, you know, would actually articulate that, whether he actually listens. But, you know, he's had protection since he was born. We have spent millions upon millions of pounds protecting him and his family. I don't want us, you and I, to be spending a fraction more.
Yeah, well, I think I'm with you on that, Di.
On this gentleman, in my opinion. And I think, like all royals, you know, he takes his chances, really, and that's life.
So were you in situ? Were you in the Royal Protection Squad? Did you have to deal with Andrew at all?
Yes, as I did with 22 others when I was the OCU commander, the chief superintendent in charge. Yes, I dealt with all of them, but I covered all their palaces. It was quite a job, really, trying to get around all of them to ensure that what you thought was happening on the ground and what you were trying to do. But, you know, in my day, it was the provisional IRA and some of the Middle East terrorists, along with fixated persons. So it was quite an interesting job. And now I'm fortunate enough, I lecture on the history of attacks, and there have been hundreds over the years. And perhaps I've offered this sometime to give you a talk on how many there have actually been. It is fascinating.
I would like
you have to take the risk and apply common sense and your knowledge of history, because quite often history repeats itself, and it's incumbent upon those protecting today, they actually know the history.
Indeed, I'd love to hear all of that. Now, Andrew, I seem to recall, perhaps you can confirm this, was a rather tricky guy to protect, to guard, because his favourite trick was to give his security detectives the slip, because he thought that was funny and amusing. He was not popular with you and your fellow officers, was he?
No, it's certainly true. And given his alleged activity, it's not surprising that he would like to give them the slip. And it's quite interesting, as you know, he's under investigation. And those very same officers, I say repeatedly, should be part of the inquiry into all his activity. They have a crucial role, and generally they know what on earth's going on. And so I question all the time, why haven't they been interviewed to find out the truth about this man?
Yeah, they would know, wouldn't they? It is extraordinary. They should get in touch with these people straight away. And generally speaking, in terms of the royals that you had to protect, was it the case that some of them understood the importance of your job, and then others, like Andrew, just thought it was a bit of a game and didn't really appreciate what it was that you were doing for him?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have various teams who actually did the personal protection, as well as many hundreds of uniform officers spread out across the variety of palaces and castles. I would hope, and I think most of the time, those who have grown up with it, with the exception of Andrew, have always realised the importance. Some of them got too close, it's alleged, over the years, but that's another story. But yes, they do appreciate it, and those men and women doing it now, I have every confidence that they learn, and particularly when you watch what happened in America and how somebody was able to run past 6 or 7 people and almost get to the venue, where it shows, you can never stop thinking the what ifs, and that's so important, and planning. So here, one would have to review given the circumstances and given who this individual is. I don't think it's terrorism related. I genuinely think it's somebody who has a beef for whatever reason. But I think the balaclava and all the rest of it adds to everyone getting, if I may say so respectfully, excited. Let's look at the facts. Once we know them, determine what then action needs to be taken to protect Andrew. And for whatever he's alleged, nobody should give him harm. The only harm should come, I think, is before a judge and jury.
Absolutely. And the headline on this, though, Di, is that all members of the royal family, all the main members of the royal family, are at constant risk from these stalkers, nutters, lunatics. They are, it's a risky job being a royal.
Well, yes, and again, you have to have a sense of proportion. Again, in the line of succession, they get now the substantial level of protection, both with my former command and wherever they go anywhere. But there's no such thing as 100% security. But it's well tried and tested. It's been done now since Victoria. In fact, George III brought it in with the old Bow Street Runners, believe it or not. So yeah, it's a fascinating story, and this happens every day, and about 1,000 incidents a year are reported, and wow. It's quite a lot. But it's not just the royals; it's MPs and all the rest of it. And, we have to apply common sense, but equally, the government needs to look at who is at risk and apply it.
Di, it's fantastic to have you on the show. Thank you very much for your time. That's Di Davis, former head of Royal Protection, talking about Andrew. He was really... the Royal Protection Squad, the detectives who had to look after Andrew in his day, they hated him. They really hated him because he thought it was a game. He's an idiot. He's a moron. He's an oaf. He thought it was funny to give them the slip. And now we've got some idea of what he may well have been giving them the slip to do. As Di was saying, these detectives, they know a lot about Prince Andrew, or the former Prince Andrew. They should be talked to, and they should be talked to fast. But the Royal Protection detectives had a nickname for Andrew. It has 4 letters. And I'm going to leave it at that, see if you can work out what it was. Let's go to break. When we come back, let's do Sunsport, shall we? All of that still to come. Stay where you are.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Dean Scoggins from The Sun, Deputy Head of Sport. The Sun is in the studio. Welcome, Dean. Let's talk about last night's Champions League semi-final. Paris Saint-Germain edged it over Bayern Munich. Not nearly as thrilling a game as the first leg, but Harry Kane, having been beaten by PSG, he reckons that they will have the edge over Arsenal in the final.
Yeah, and look, it really hurt me watching Harry Kane in despair at the end as a Tottenham fan. I really want him to win the Champions League. He's obviously didn't do it with us in 2019.
It's been a season of pain for you, hasn't it?
It has been, yeah. And you know, it would have just been if Spurs stay up and Harry Kane had lifted the Champions League and the World Cup, then I could have just about dealt with it. But no. So I think he's right. Look, I mean, Paris Saint-Germain played absolutely swashbuckling football in the first game in Paris, and then in the second leg played a very different style, shut out Bayern Munich, managed to, you know, absolutely close them out, and you know, we've watched them play two different ways. So where Arsenal fans might have been thinking, oh, if they're that open against us in the final, we'll be all right, then watching that Bayern Munich game last night, you think, well, hang on, this PSG team can play both ways.
They can do whatever they want. They're that good, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They were fantastic. But, you know, Kane said it's two totally different teams. It'll be a really interesting final. semi-final, and obviously PSG winning it last year, I think that gives them the edge as slight favourites. And as I say, I think he's right, and he might have won the Bundesliga title this year, Kane, but the Champions League is the one he wanted, isn't it? And in the race for the Ballon d'Or as well, that was the one he really wanted.
Well, PSG, you would reckon they've got a good defence, because in the first leg, both Bayern and PSG looked like they didn't have a defence at all.
They didn't want to defend. Yeah, they didn't want to defend. Well, what was really interesting last night was that the PSG keeper, and I did this on my socials and tactics show earlier today, the PSG keeper kicked all the goal kicks out of play, like a rugby into touch. And that I think that's basically because they didn't want Bayern winning the ball from a header in transition and then it going straight to Michael Olise. So put it out of play, and then we block off that side of the field from the throw-in, because it all crowds out from the throw-in, and then Michael Olise doesn't get the ball. But, Luis Enrique's shown that he can set up a team to score 5 and then set up a team to block out the highest scorers in Europe in the second leg.
How many goals has old Kane got this season?
55.
55 goals
55 for the season.
Jesus.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing. Hopefully another 10 in the World Cup, Kev, eh?
Yeah. He's going into the World Cup in good form. Right, let's talk about Man United. Michael Carrick is admitting clarity is needed on the Man United manager's job. He's secured 10 wins out of 14. They should give him the job, shouldn't they?
Well, they're in the Champions League, and what I think's really interesting about this, and Samuel Luckhurst, our fantastic Man United correspondent, has had his finger on the pulse with this all the way through. And what's interesting out of this press conference today, and Samuel asking the questions, was that this is the first time Michael Carrick's nibbled. It's the first time he said anything about his position. It's I'm the caretaker. I'm just here to win games, get us into the Champions League. Now that Champions League football is secured after the win against Liverpool, it's now, well, everybody needs clarity, don't they? Who's going to be the coach? The players need clarity. We need to know which players we're going to bring in the summer. If you're buying players, they want to know who the manager's going to be. So this is the first time that Michael Carrick has sort of said, his direct quote is, listen, clarity is important. Moving forward, it's at the end of the season. We've finished strong. We've put ourselves in a good position. And the situation of my role and what it looks like moving forward, this is the natural time.
So, I mean, who else is out there that Man United might be interested in?
What has been very interesting for us reporting on it and trying to get to the bottom of different things the last few days. We broke the story the other day that Hertzler was going to sign a new contract, which has happened today, so he's off the table. Iraola is leaving Bournemouth, and we believe that he's talking to at least 2 other Premier League clubs, including Crystal Palace. You know that Glasner's moving on.
Why would you leave Bournemouth and join Crystal Palace?
Well, yeah,
leave Bournemouth,
question.
go to Man United.
Yeah, but that's maybe a pointer that Man United is off the table for him. And are they moving onwards with that process? Look, Eddie Howe's a name that won't go away. So all of a sudden, these wheels are turning. Frank Lampard's getting some interest, not just from Chelsea. So, and he's obviously brought Coventry back up into the Premier League.
Coventry, even their first season.
Well, if all of a sudden one of those big boys comes looking again, then it's very hard to turn down, isn't it? So, look, there's a lot of moving parts at the moment, and I think this is an indicator where Carrick's just starting to go, I need to know. Am I going to be there, or does he start to look at the likes of Crystal Palace or those type of teams?
Fascinating times. Well, let's talk about Roberto De Zerbi now, your team.
Yeah.
He's accused those slamming Aston Villa for their mass changes against Spurs of double standards.
Yeah, and I think what he's saying is essentially this is the West Ham fans that he's accusing of double standards here, or people. And to be fair, some of the pundits on talkSPORT, including Simon Jordan, who said that it was a disgrace, the team that Aston Villa picked. But De Zerbi's gone all Jose Mourinho here and named every player in the team for Aston Villa and international. And oh, by the way, Nottingham Forest made 8 changes the day after at Chelsea and won. So why shouldn't a team who is in a European semi-final tonight prioritise a European semi-final over a Premier League game?
Exactly right. It's up to Aston Villa what they do. I mean, if they want to put a bunch of 8-year-olds, it's up to them.
Exactly. And also, we would say that with Spurs' injury list, Spurs were missing more players than Villa were. So, and what De Zerbi's essentially saying is, give us our credit for winning away at Aston Villa when we're in a relegation fight and putting ourselves back into a position. So, and backing Unai Emery to say he can massage and move around his squad however he likes.
Exactly right. Exactly. It's nothing to do. It's so. De Zerbi's, or rather, those who are slamming Aston Villa. Are acting as if Aston Villa actually give a toss about Spurs or any other team.
Take it to Spurs last season. Spurs they did finish 17th in the end, but they were never in danger of relegation, and they were playing the first team in the Europa League, which they went on to win, and then because they picked the second team in the league, they fell like a stone, but they were never ever actually in danger of going down. So I mean, goodness me, poor managers who have to rotate their squad. So.
Yeah, indeed. So let's talk about your team, Spurs. They got that vital home win, and they've got Leeds next. Is that
Leeds
right?
on Monday night, and obviously that comes after Arsenal have gone to West Ham, who are one place above Spurs in the table. They go to West Ham on Sunday.
On Sunday.
Yeah, so Spurs will know on Sunday. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Who are Spurs fans supporting on Sunday? They don't really want Arsenal to win the title, but if Arsenal win at West Ham on Sunday and Spurs win Monday, you'd like to think that Spurs are almost safe then. But look, I mean, if I was being cheeky and I could guarantee a Spurs win, which is never the case, but if you could guarantee Spurs were going to win Monday night, then I wouldn't mind a draw on at West Ham Arsenal on Sunday, but I can't see it.
As we were just saying off when we were off air, where did West Ham's terrible season come? At the beginning of the season, no one was backing them for relegation.
No, it started terribly, and then also when Nuno came in, they didn't have a great start. It took them quite a while to get going. It was only really the new year that there was a bit of resurgence, but it just shows that in the Premier League, you're off. If you're 90% in the Premier League, you're nowhere.
So what else is still to be decided? Obviously, we've got to worry about Arsenal. We've got to worry about Man City. Who've Man City got to play now?
Good question. Man City have got Brentford away, Brentford at home, and then Bournemouth away, and then that Bournemouth game comes just before the FA Cup final against Chelsea. So it does look like a real uphill struggle for Man City now that they dropped the points against Everton to get back.
Arsenal have got West Ham,
Crystal Palace, and you're testing me out
and
now.
Burnley,
correct.
So that's points in the bag. So so Arsenal.
I think if Arsenal win against West Ham on Sunday, they're home and hosed, and they can start really, really thinking about a Champions League final.
Be amazing if they do win that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, doing that double would be.
I mean, because they got very, very nervous. As I say, telling you, I was at Arsenal on Saturday, and they really, I mean, they obviously just went, it's only Fulham, and so they really got their mojo back.
Yeah, I mean, I think he brought Miles Laskelly into midfield. Saka looks back to Saka for being fit, and they showed a lot more intent, and I think a lot of fans have been saying it for a while. No one's going to give you a title. You've got to go there and win it. And we can't take it away from them when they've been top of the league for so long, but they've been sort of edging games, haven't they, rather than going and winning games.
Well, they got very nervous, but I think they've got their mojo.
I think they've got over it now, and I think they'll definitely win the Premier League, whether they're good enough to beat PSG.
So Arsenal wins the Premier League, Spurs stays up. Great times for North London. So Dean, thank you very much. That's Dean Scoggins, Deputy Head of Sport in The Sun, all in the back pages tomorrow. Back in just a moment. Stay where you are.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is the final hour of today's drive time. Peter Cardwell will take over the helm of the good ship Talk at 7 p.m, but we got 60 sizzling minutes still to go. And for the next few minutes, in a little while, by the way, I'll be joined by the great Kinsey Schofield, our royal guru. We'll find out what's been going on Planet Harry and Meghan. Plus, also, as you just heard, quite a drama involving Andrew Mountbatten at Windsor, who, of course, is no longer actually sort of royal. He's commoner now. Maybe we should just not talk about him because he's not royal, but we will. That in just a little while. First, though, let's go over to barrister, a commentator, political commentator, Stephen Barrett. Welcome, Stephen.
Thanks for having me, Kev. Always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure to have you on the show. Well, I don't have to tell you, but we have to be slightly careful. We mustn't be too political. We'll talk about issues, but perhaps not point the finger at any particular parties, because it's local election day, and apparently if we say anything, that will completely affect the way everybody votes, and we're not allowed to do that, so we have to obey the rules. Let's do that, though. So, a few issues I want to talk to you about, but I thought, because I haven't mentioned this yet, but the Telegraph, Daily Telegraph, last couple of days, has been doing some great work about what I would suggest is one of the serious problems with this country. That is the civil service. Yesterday they revealed that there are civil servants who have literally not been in the office for years, 2 years, 3 years, because what they're doing is they're coming into they're working from home, but they're required to make the odd appearance. So what they do is they come into town, into Whitehall, they go near the office to the point where they can key into the Wi-Fi, the office Wi-Fi, and at that point, it's as if they went to work. So they're avoiding going into the office altogether. Today, the Telegraph is revealing that civil servants are abusing flexi time to claim up to 50 days holiday a year. They're able to clock up extra leave by declaring overtime through a system that allows public servants to choose their start and finish times. So they're mucking around with flexi time to give themselves 50 extra days holiday per year. The civil service is a rancid mess that is not serving this country anymore. Am I right?
Of course you're right. And abusing the sign-in system for personal profit. I mean, who do these civil servants think that they are? Members of the House of Lords? The reason I'm down the line today, I'd much rather be in studio with you, is that I live in an old Victorian house, and I've replaced about 90% of the pipes in this old Victorian house, and because I've had endless leaks. What I should have done is replace 100% of the pipes in this old Victorian house, because during the middle of the night, one of them started leaking, and I've had to deal with that drama today.
Oh, God.
That is a metaphor for our country. We basically live in an old Victorian house. Nobody has seriously improved the Constitution since the Victorians. Tony Blair has done a lot of damage to it, but we are living in a Victorian house that needs rewiring. And so the civil service just doesn't work. Like everything else, it doesn't work. Nothing works. And we have to rewire everything. We have to replumb everything. We have to get our beautiful Victorian house. And I don't want to change its character. You know, I'm all for preserving the original tiles, and I've got my original fireplace just over there. And, you know, of course, we keep our pomp and our circumstance and our nation and our identity. But the plumbing and the wiring doesn't work. And the civil service is the best example of that right now. I mean, the police service is another one that just doesn't work. They're not working.
50 days holiday a year by screwing the flexi time system. That is ridiculous. They never ever go to the office. Remember Jacob Rees-Mogg some years ago when he was in the cabinet, went to the MOD, I think it was, and left a message saying, "Oh, I popped in to see you. Sorry you were out," because the entire office was empty. This is bizarre. This is absurd. We have these great departments around Whitehall. There's no one in them. them. I think working from home is the worst thing that ever happened to this country. We should abandon it. More and more private companies are getting rid of it, are ditching it, because they've realised late in life what we all knew was going to happen in the first place. And that is, if you let people work from home, guess what? They're unlikely to work. If they work at all, it won't be much. They'll mainly be working, switching on Netflix or taking their dog for a walk or going down the pub. Private companies are waking up to this and they're saying, come back to work. You know, when the cat's away, the mice play. That's the point. If the boss isn't there, people won't work. So the private sector has worked that out. The public sector, the civil service, my God, I mean, working from home is now... well, it's a crisis for the rest of us. They're not going to work. They're just taking money, they're earning their salaries and not going to work. This is ridiculous.
It's the paradox of being a human, Kev, is that any extreme is always wrong. And what we're living through is the extreme that automation will always be better than doing things manually or doing things with a human involved. And we are now at the point where we can demonstrate, we can prove that automation is not superior. You know, we all have to use these telephone helplines that don't work. We all have to use the automated AI chatbots that don't work. The apex of proving that automation doesn't work is not merely people trying to pretend that they're working from home when they're not. It's going to be when we rely on AI. And every now and again, there's a certain percentage, I'm not very good at maths, so I'm not going to even claim what it is, but at a certain number of times, AI just completely goes bonkers. It collapses. It
hallucinates.
That's the polite word, yes. It hallucinates. So I've typed in goodness knows how many times since Google put in its completely useless AI assistant at the top of its search engine. I've typed in Google. But I had one recently where I typed in and the AI result just came back in either French or Spanish. And I don't know which one it was, and I don't know why it did it. And it's like, well, if we rely on this, if we rely on automation, it's going to fail. So getting people back to the office, getting physical humans back talking to physical humans seems to me just a good idea.
Yeah, here's the deal with AI. I'm glad you brought that up. For journalists, AI... I think it's actually worse than useless, and I'll tell you why. It's because when you look for information, when you ask AI for what you need, it will come back with beautifully constructed answers. It's all there. But then you better bloody well check it, because the chances are AI just hallucinated and gave you answers that it thought you wanted, but not answers that are actually accurate. So the point is, with journalists, it's like, I'm going to ask AI. And, I say to people, well, when they give you the answer, make sure you check it so you can see what's the point of AI. You might as well just start and check it yourself. Look, AI is going to be great.
I'll go one further with lawyers. I'll go one further with lawyers. For lawyers, using AI is a fantastic opportunity to get sued.
Yeah, we've got a way to go with AI, haven't we? I agree. I mean, it's going to be, it is revolutionising the world, but I think it's got a long way to go. People seem to think it is the finished item. It seriously isn't, because you can't actually fully trust it. And if you can't trust something, what is the point of it? But I guess we're digressing, really, aren't we? Interesting conversation, though. Let me ask you about this. School kids. This is a worrying story. This is about teachers. School kids are now required to do a course in citizenship, GCSE citizenship. I don't mind that idea, learning about what it means to be British and what citizenship entails, blah, blah, blah. Well, the kids on this course are being taught that freedom of speech has to stop at the point where you offend people. So freedom of speech is one thing. So they're saying kids are being taught in citizenship courses that freedom of speech stops at the point where you offend people, and they're being taught that it is their civic duty not to offend others. That's just not true. So these kids are being fed inaccurate, be kind claptrap by woke left-wing teachers, I would suggest.
Yeah, so it's let's just list these, Kev. It's a lie.
Yeah.
It's illegal. 3, it's the belief of the communists and the socialists, and it's a technique to control everybody. And we have put up with this for far too long. The idea that you have sinned because somebody has taken offense at what you have done, that you have done some unspecified wrong because someone has taken offense at something you have done or said. Many of us have lived under the threat of this terror, and we simply have to reject it. We have to say that offense is not given. If they're taking it, that's their choice, and I don't care. You know, we should go back. Of course, we have sins. Of course, there are things which are both morally wrong and legally wrong, but they should be clear and known in advance and apply equally to all of us. And instead, what we have is offense culture, which is where if you can get enough people to be offended enough, or at least performatively pretend to do this. And let's not forget, Kev, 2,500 years ago, people used to pay actors to pretend to express extreme emotions in the street for political reasons. And I don't think humans have changed. So I still think that there will be paid actors in our society who are paid to get performatively emotional about political issues. And call me a bluff old cynic if you want to, but I don't think humans change. So this idea that offence it has to go. It should never be anywhere near children. That's obviously abusive. That company needs to be found out. It needs to be removed from schools. If that principle is in the curriculum, it needs to be ripped out. And we need to, once again, fix the system because it has become flabby. And just like me intending to get rid of the remaining 10% of the plumbing, we probably have intended to fix this with teachers for a very long time. But somebody actually needs to do it.
Yeah, indeed. This is all part of a kind of growing syndrome in this country that, well, Merseyside Police a few years back had a big poster campaign all over Liverpool, big posters saying to be offensive is an offence. And then the police chief, the chief constable of Merseyside Police, had to be informed, actually, officer, it's not an offence to be offensive. And this is a top copper who didn't realise that it is not.
Was he made to repay for those posters? Was he made to repay our public money that he spent on those posters?
Take a wild guess.
But he wasn't. Was he?
Yeah.
And there needs to be rules, and then people need to face consequences for their actions. We need to get rid of the word independent and replace it with the word accountable.
Yeah, yeah. But this be kind, woke approach to life, which does seek to demonise being offensive. Now, what I would say to kids is, look, it's not very nice to be offensive. Try not to offend other people. But it's very important also to stress to those kids, it is not illegal to be offensive, nor is it your civic duty not to be offensive. These kids are being taught something that is not true.
It's not true. It's absolutely not true. I'm not the biggest fan of the current Lady Chief Justice, and that's demonstrable in other places. But to her credit, the current Lady Chief Justice has confirmed this herself. You know, in case after case after case, judges have confirmed the law is that there is no right to not be offended. Offence is just not a thing. It's part of civic society, and you can't police offence because what's offensive to me might not be offensive to you. You know, I take great offence at anybody who uses the word Herefordshire, because I don't think there is such a county. I think that's just land that the city of Hereford has stolen from Worcestershire. Now, that's a very personal and very specific type of offence to take. But, we can't enforce this. We can't. If somebody says the word Herefordshire and I go, officer, I've been really offended by this, we can't arrest them. That would be insane. And I use a slightly bizarre example for that point, because, offence is so subjective.
Yeah,
it doesn't work.
Well, it's certainly not illegal, and these kids should not be told this. Let me ask you about this. There are lawyers, in my view, like your good self, and there are human rights lawyers who seem to be a different species to most other legally qualified people. Now, over in France, this is what's happened on Sunday morning. Some French cops, les gendarmes on the French northern French beaches, finally actually stopped a boat. They stabbed it, slashed it with their knives, punctured it. There were 25 migrants on board, and they didn't get to embark on their journey to the promised land, 21 miles from Calais to Dover. They didn't get to make that journey. Those cops who, thank God, finally did their job, are now under investigation for breaching the human rights of those migrants. Human rights. The problem with human rights, they ought to be a very, very good thing. But every time you introduce into a conversation the word human rights or human rights lawyer, you know that what is going to follow will be mad and insane. These people were not at risk. Their lives were not at risk. The boat had run aground. The coppers burst the dinghy, got them all off, and now they are under investigation for breaching the migrants' human rights. Human rights to do what? Cross the channel illegally and break into Britain unlawfully. This is bizarre. This is mad.
It's perverse, Kev. The people on the boats were the criminals, so they're the ones who ought to be being arrested and ought to face justice. Human rights law is not law in any way that I understand it, and I've struggled for years to explain this to non-lawyers in an accessible way. Let's try one of the many ways I've tried. So if you think about law, when it works, it's a consistent application of rules. So every rule is like one Lego block. And you put one Lego block on the other Lego block, and then you build this vast construction. So financial services law, this beautiful, massive cathedral of Lego blocks. You know, it's a very, very complex area of law, and it's beautiful, and it works, and it functions. Of course, there are improvements to be made, but that's what it is. Human rights law is just one Lego block sitting there, glowing like rain, changing color, every minute. That can be anything you want to be, any size you want it to be, any shape you want it to be. It can do absolutely anything. Can be a cathedral in a second. Can be this small in a day. It's just nonsense. It's just basic principles. You cannot govern yourself by constantly reassessing basic principles. This is Article 8. This is the right to a family life. How can the right to a family life apply to the right to break into a country? You know, this is just gibberish, but because human rights functions like this magic Lego brick that is eternally able to change shape and color into whatever it wants to be, whatever we need it to be, always, by the way, Kev, always in the pursuit of communism. It never changes shape or color or form in the pursuit of anything else. Yeah. It's always in the pursuit of communism. I mean, it's not. I don't think it's law at all. Human rights,
the European Convention on Human Rights is brought into play, for example, when a foreigner an asylum seeker, migrant who arrived here, broke our laws, paedophile, right? Paedophile. They go to jail for, say, 4 years, out in 3 probably. They come out. Of course, we should deport them. They're paedophiles. They appeal against their deportation because they got a family. They got a couple of kids and a wife or something, and they're allowed to say because of their human rights, their right to a family life. This is a paedophile. This is a threat. This person is a danger to the children of this country. That is a good example of where human rights law becomes mad. It is mad and pernicious.
Yeah, why? But why, to carry on this analogy, why bother painstakingly working to construct, something out of a million tiny little Lego bricks, if instead you just get one Lego brick that's magic and you can do whatever the hell you want with it? Human rights is just this ridiculous, it's a perversion of law. To be honest, it sort of mocks law because, to get to the stage where if we just take financial services law, which I do understand, which is painstakingly built out of, hundreds of thousands of Lego bricks, that took a lot of effort for me to understand that. A huge amount of work. Yeah, if I just say I'm a human rights lawyer, I can just use the one magic Lego brick, and as long as I'm always supporting communism, we know I'll get my result. Ding, 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 I win. Keir Starmer gets to take this glamorous case to these glamorous courts to get the migrants to have the rights to immediate benefits claims. The magic Lego brick. Wow, it's amazing. You don't have to do any work. You don't have to spend hours understanding a very complicated system. You just use the magic Lego brick. That's what human rights.
The magic, just before you go, Steve.
I hope that works, by the way. I really do hope that works. I will try other analogies.
Okay, I've got one last question. Try to define, what is the difference, for people like me and all the audience, what is the difference between a lawyer and a human rights lawyer?
Well, I think the human rights lawyers.
The human rights lawyers left wing.
They're all left. Of course, they're all left wing. They're all forced to be left wing. I once met the only person at Doughty Street Chambers who admitted in secret, and only because it was to me, to once having voted Tory. But I can't imagine that they either survived or are still there. But of course they're entirely left-wing. Of course they're politicised. They've basically perverted law. They infected us early on. There are various areas where the hard left actually infected, and I think we do need to call it an infection. They'll get terribly offended by that word, but that word doesn't hurt them because words don't hurt people. But it's a good way of understanding what went on, and they crept into law and they've infected it. And whenever you hear the word human rights lawyer, I do think you can just immediately turn off. They mean the people who all they know is the magic Lego brick. All they're ever going to do is talk the progressive cause. All they're ever going to do is use the magic Lego brick to get some lefty outcome. They're not real lawyers in any sense. Real lawyers who understand something like a cathedral built out of 100,000 Lego bricks, be that insolvency law, be that financial services law, be that contract or any other complicated area of law, they always have my respect, and I don't care who they vote for. But these human rights lawyers, yeah, they are absolutely a lefty infection into law. And just like every lefty infection, particularly from the weak left, the Fabian Marxists, they're quite offensive. They quite rub your face in it. They make it obvious what they're doing.
Yeah, it's a virtue signalling thing, isn't it? Look at me, I'm a human rights lawyer. I tell you what, Stephen, you're the ideal man to have on a day when we're not allowed to talk about politics. Just had an interesting conversation. All we need is a couple of pints. But great to have you on the show, Stephen. Thank you so much. Stephen Barrett there, barrister and commentator. Next up, we'll take some of your calls. Get on the phone, by the way, 03444991000. You know what we're talking about? Are you worried about the rat virus? Or are we in COVID panic mode, in your view? 03444991000. What do you think about the fact that 1.5 million benefit claimers are migrants? Foreigners, if you're out there working, hard-working taxpayer, what do you think about the fact that you're funding these foreigners, many of whom came here illegally, many of whom don't even have jobs, you're paying for them? Why do we allow this to happen? 03444991000. And what do you reserve the right, because I do, to have a pint at 6 in the morning if you're waiting for an aeroplane at an airport? What do you think about Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary saying, no, we've got to limit, we've got to restrict how many pints, how many drinks people have before they get on planes? Nobody condones drunkenness on planes, but whether or not I have 2 or 3 pints before I get on, it's my business, isn't it? You know, get out of our lives. Stop imposing more rules, restrictions, laws, regulations. Aren't you sick of it? So, Michael O'Leary, wind your neck in, but that's my view. Perhaps you think he's right. He says drunkenness on planes is a scourge. They have to make too many emergency landings, and I certainly accept that. But why punish the vast majority because of the irresponsibility of a tiny minority? Those are my views. What do you think? 03444991000. Let's go to break. We'll take a couple of calls when we come back. Stay where you are.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. I'm going to talk to Kinsey Schofield in just a little while, but before we go to the next break, let's take some calls from the people that matter. That's you, the fantastic audience. First of all, let's go to Caroline in London. Hello, Caroline. What would you like to say?
Hello, Kevin. About the migrant, illegal or whatever, about all this money. Now, you might not agree with me. I am not a conspiracy theorist. But I don't know one single country in the history of the planet, as we know it, that's allowed hundreds of thousands or millions of people to come in illegally, and we just give them homes, money, mobiles, clothes, art classes. So I don't believe that Starmer's.
Well, hang on, wait. I'll tell you what I've got to do on this one, Caroline, because it's we've got the local election days. Okay. I have to be studiously neutral. So what we're going to do in terms of the migrant crisis, because I think it's fair, we point to the political class, because let's face it, the migrant crisis has been caused by both the Tories and Labour. So let's not point the finger specifically, but I think we can say that our politicians have been outrageous, atrocious when it comes to our escalating migrant crisis. They created it, and they have participated in its extraordinary escalation. We're in trouble because of that lot, aren't we?
Absolutely. Okay, I take your point. Yeah. But there's only one explanation I can think of, and I've been thinking about this for a long time and talking to friends. Yeah. This is being done on purpose.
Yeah, well, this is it. I'm not about it on purpose, but I've got to be careful. I'm not going to mention any particular political party, but I would say that there are too many MPs, too many ministers down the recent years who haven't really cared very much about the migrant crisis. They're metropolitan people. They don't really care. They live in big houses. They have never had the resolve to deal with the migrant crisis. Donald Trump, when he became president, he said, I can solve this migrant crisis. So in other words, he had the resolve. And guess what? Almost overnight, 95% of migrants were being stopped at the southern border. If you have a government, if you have politicians that actually want to solve the migrant crisis, I think it can be done. But I agree with you. I doubt, frankly, that all that many of our MPs and cabinet ministers want to solve the migrant crisis.
I don't think they're in a position to, any party, any MP. I think this is way above them. I really do, Kevin, because there's no other explanation. And it could be to do with Brexit and that they want to ruin the UK or make it as an example.
Well, if it's above politicians, though, Caroline, who would you point the finger at? If it's above politicians, if it's above governments?
Well, there's something called Davos. There's all these secret meetings. We don't know who they are, do we? We don't even know who's running. We don't even know who's running.
Davos is last year's thing. Nobody cares about that anymore.
No. Well, I'm sure there's other meetings, but this is definitely a plan. And the way we're going, the UK is going to be at finish.
Yeah, we're in trouble, and I do take your point. It's almost mysterious why this migrant crisis is just allowed to escalate and escalate and escalate, and has been allowed to do that now for something like 16, 17 years. It is mysterious. I agree with you, Caroline. Very good call. Thank you very much for ringing. Caroline in London. Should we quickly talk to Tom in Rugby? Hello, Tom. You want to talk about hantavirus? Are you panicking?
No, I want to tell you a story, Kevin, about the crass handling of the media in terms of health issues they don't understand. but it also feeds into the migrant issue as well. Quite a few years ago, when I was still working, a little boy of 4 was rushed into hospital very ill. His X-ray showed he had TB, and he was found to have TB meningitis as well, and tragically he died. Now, the health authorities have to inform the local health commission about this, who went to investigate, and they found that he lived next door to a bloke who had TB, theoretically on treatment, but he was non-compliant and also drank heavily, which negates the effect of treatment.
Okay.
So they went round to pick this guy up, and he wasn't there. He was on a coach trip, a day trip to Blackpool. So
get a few drinks there, right?
Exactly. So the police stopped the coach in a service station, and he was taken into custody, as they're entitled to do with someone who's a danger to health.
Yeah.
To the fury of the family, and who went straight to the press. And of course, the next day or a couple of days later, there was a big headline: shock horror, man arrested on family trip just because he was ill. The little boy who died was never mentioned. And apart from his close family, I think I'm the only person in the world who remembers that little boy.
Well, that does sound a shocking story. It may be that the journalists, the press, the media didn't know about the little boy, to be fair.
Well, they should have actually found out.
Well, it's not necessarily that easy, Tom. I'm here to tell you.
Yeah. Well, we contacted the editor of this. It was one of the big ones, and we explained it. And he did put a small retraction about the next day, saying, "Well, maybe."
But I mean, the one thing I would say about this, Tom, I mean, that does happen in the media. You very often you're only given one side of a story, one slice of a story, and you don't know about other elements of it, and it's not the journalist's fault. But I do recoil at the sort of syndrome of blaming the media for everything. I think that if we are to go into panic mode, or if we are going into panic mode over the rat virus, it's because of the COVID crisis, and the COVID crisis was not caused by journalists, it was caused by hysterical experts and a mad government.
But look, this also fills into the migrant issue, because many of these migrants coming in from, African countries, statistically speaking, a good number of them will be infected with TB and HIV.
Well, hang on a second. Well, we don't know that, do we?
Well, we don't know it, but statistically...
Tom, I've got to say, that is a ridiculous thing to say. Of course we don't know that. I don't think there's any evidence at all that... I mean, I'm no fan of the migrant crisis. I'm no fan of all these people who invade our country all the time and seem to be let in. But to suggest that loads of them have got HIV, there's no evidence for that. I've never even heard that suggestion.
Exactly. Has anyone looked?
Oh, come on, Tom. Don't be ridiculous. That you know for a fact that's nonsense. But I take your point about the other elements of what you were saying. So thank you for a good call, Tom, in Rugby. Let's go to break.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Let's go straight over to the United States of America and talk to our excellent royal guru, Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. Hi, Kins.
Hi, Kev. Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Lots to talk about today. Am I over-interpreting this? What I'm talking about is this ongoing publicity war that Meghan seems to think she's fighting with Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and, of course, William, the Prince of Wales. So we've seen so many examples over the past few years that whenever something nice happens with Kate and Wills and the kids, seconds later, sometimes, Meghan responds with some bit of publicity on her own behalf. What I'm talking about now is yesterday we got the great news that Catherine, Princess of Wales, is to make her first foreign engagement since falling ill with cancer. So she's going to Italy. So that was a brilliant announcement. All thrilled about that. Almost, minutes later, Instagram, sure as night follows day, there's a picture posted by Meghan of Harry and Archie when he was a baby. To be fair, it's Archie's 7th birthday, but it struck me that this was Meghan using the 7th birthday of her son as a weapon in her publicity war, her ongoing publicity war against Catherine, Princess of Wales. What did you think?
Yeah, that's a reach. I mean, it's her son's birthday, and she always posts her children's birthdays on social media. I mean, what stood out to me is that she was like, "Happy 7th birthday, Archie," days after saying it's been the worst 7 years of her life, and thank God astrology is coming to save the day. That's really what stood out to me. Yeah, we're going to always get birthday acknowledgments because I do think that Meghan envies the way that the Prince and Princess of Wales, their family, their children are celebrated, but we have more access to their children. It's choreographed. They are highly strategic in the way they share their kids with us. We don't see what's going on live and in person, but we certainly, they go out of their way to share sweet little glimpses of, it was Charlotte's birthday recently, and we got not only a gorgeous photograph of the princess, but we also got a really fun video of how sporty and active and joyful she is. Same with Prince Louis not too long ago. So I think that she shares these images in an attempt to compete with the love that we feel for the Wales children, but we don't have the same relationship with her children. They are bizarre in the way that they only share pictures of them typically when they want something from us, like attention on a new fruit spread that's being launched. But yeah, I don't think she's trying to compete with Catherine here. I think she just knew that an unseen photo of Harry and Archie would generate some interest.
A lot of, you and I sort of alluded to this on Monday, but there's a lot of media coverage at the moment of where Harry and Meghan are at. The Daily Mail last weekend reporting that as all of her schemes and all of her plans seem to come to nothing, they all seem to fail. Daily Mail reporting that Meghan, behind the gilded gates of Montecito Towers, is, and I quote, spiralling. She's spiralling into crisis. Nothing she does seems to work. They clearly need money. The Australian tour, for whatever they say, the pretend royal tour of Australia, was frankly a disaster. It was a publicity disaster. And the word is she's spiralling into crisis. I don't think things are all that happy there. Do you?
She is a level of delusion that I oftentimes admire. I wish I could just be as oblivious and delusional as Meghan is. It's my understanding that they're planning a similar trip to Australia, to Africa, and they're using that template. They expect to use that template there. So I think that they are still scheming and working behind the scenes. I think that we will likely see Prince Harry try to show up Prince William at the World Cup. I expect that to be on their agenda. But I mean, the fact is that nothing has worked out. For some reason, she gets these companies to allow the separation to happen without formally acknowledging it. Like I was just addressing the Lemonada saga today. I think it's very odd that Lemonada hasn't announced that they are formally no longer working together. But and even Netflix, that relationship has clearly drastically changed, but Netflix won't speak out on it. In fact, they say nice things about her. So I think that she manages to survive somehow. And I wish I had whatever Etsy witch she must hire to stay afloat.
But I think, like a lot of love it a lot. I don't doubt that Harry and Meghan have a loving relationship. I just think it's under strain, like so many other loving relationships, loving marriages, because of the M word, money. Money is at the heart of so many relationship problems for so many couples. I think they've got serious money troubles. So they can go on about, we blueprinted our new way of making money. We go to a country, we make a few speeches, we pick up $250,000 for going to some stupid weekend retreat for women only, that kind of stuff. I sell my clothes on my fashion website. Everything I wear, you can buy, etc., etc. Well, that's all very well, but I would suggest, and I don't know how many clothes she actually sold in Australia, how much her cut of the action was, but I would suggest that between the two of them, optimistically, they made a matter of a few $100,000. I think that's probably optimistic, but let's say they made a few $100,000. Well, these two, they need $6 million a year just to cover their basic bills. There's not enough money coming in, as far as I can work out, Kinsey.
I all I see is hustle. I don't know how broke they are, but all I see is hustle. Meghan is relentless. She's not going quietly. What's going on with As Ever? I don't really think a lot's going on with As Ever. We know that Netflix pulled out because they weren't impressed with the return on investment. And it's my understanding that Meghan was incredibly controlling. But Meghan always has something else up her sleeve. Will she resort to having to write the book? She quietly told people she would never write about the British royal family. Inevitably, I'm confident that she will. She talked about how she discovered her diaries at Frogmore Cottage and she never had to sign an NDA. Those were warning shots. That book will inevitably come to fruition. And maybe that's the last resort.
That's her banker, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot of money in that for her.
Yeah. And I'm not saying she's going to do it tomorrow, but I am saying she's constantly working so many different angles to the point where I complain about it. Are you an expert in this, or this? But she's a survivor. She's trying to survive. And Harry, in some cases, lucked out because they will never go hungry because of the woman he married. I don't think it's Harry that will ever save the day. I think it's Meghan that is constantly working all of these different angles. And I'm not trying to be flattering or anything. I'm just saying ultimately I think that she's a survivor.
Yeah, I think she works quite hard. I'm not sure about him. I mean,
a hustler.
As I say, she never gives up. You're right. She's tenacious, and whatever money is going into that household, she's making it. He's not making anything, is he?
No, but I mean, while we are being complimentary about what seems to be her work ethic, sometimes, I mean, I do think she just wants to be an influencer, which sometimes is just taking a pretty picture and uploading it with the right hashtags, no offense. But I also think that she is willing to, and we've seen her be capable of cheapening the British royal family's brand. And so while we can applaud her all day long for keeping food on the table, I would also stress I do think that the British royal family should remove their titles from them, because she does not have very high standards for who she associates with, what she endorses, what she puts a Duchess title or monogram on. And ultimately, it cheapens and weakens the British royal family's brand. And I do think that they need to be cautious about that, because Meghan, like I said, desperation will come into play. And, you know, it's the silly things like Soho House. I mean, I think I told you, in the middle of Meghan running around Australia with her friend from Soho House, all of the local news stories in LA were about an alleged sexual assault that happened there. You have to be very cautious about these brand, and guess where you can find, as ever, Soho House. You have to be very cautious about the brands and the people you align yourself with. And while Meghan is going to stay, you know, networking and climbing the social ladder, which is how she secured Harry, she has no standards. And I think that will negatively affect the royals ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, what she's doing, the monetizing of her minor royal status, is exactly what her late great majesty Queen Elizabeth II did not want. She'll be spinning in her grave, horrified by what they're doing. Before you go, Kinsey, quick last question. There's a new biography out by the royal author Christopher Anderson, which suggests that in the week leading up to Harry and Meghan's notorious interview with Oprah Winfrey, Prince William was literally sick with worry about it, could barely bring himself to eat during the week leading up to the interview, and was retching, was literally being sick with fear of what his brother and his sister-in-law might say. It's by not someone I know, author Christopher Anderson, but your thoughts on that story in his new biography of Catherine, Princess of Wales?
I mean, I think that's easy to say, that Prince William was nervous about what Harry and Meghan were going to say before the Oprah Winfrey interview. We all were. And also, it's my understanding...
With good cause, by the way, with Kinsey.
It's my understanding that that they had been plotting that like 6 months before they were married. You know, Meghan wanted to do that, sit down with Oprah Winfrey, and they kind of knew that they were going to change Oprah's life in such a great way for Oprah. But really, it's the downfall of the Sussex brand, that interview. What did Prince William have to be nervous about? I don't know. Maybe he thought Harry would talk about the physical altercation Harry later reveals in Spare. I mean, ultimately, I don't believe that there's a royal racist, so I don't believe that William was worried about that, if that's what we're... I don't think we should put those two together, because I don't think that that actually happened. I don't think that there was a royal racist.
Yeah, it's just an interesting story that I wanted to get your take on. But Kinsey, fabulous conversation as always. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll talk next week. Ladies and gentlemen, that was the brilliant Kinsey Schofield, host of Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered. We're going to go to break now, and we're going to finish the show with a few calls from you. 03444991000. Give me a call. You never know, we can get you on. So stick around. Back in a mo.
The world is on fire. Russia, Iran, China, conflicts brewing in all of their different regions. They're not waiting. But here in Britain, our armed forces are underfunded, they're undermanned, and they're underprepared. And nobody in government wants to talk about it. Well, we do. I'm Philip Ingram, and I spent my career in the world of intelligence, military planning, strategic planning, and unfortunately, conflict. This is Talk War, and this is where we analyse the conflicts shaping our world.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Going to go to phones in just a second. A couple of messages you've been kind enough to send in. This is Andy. Andy Mack says, I've worked in the water industry all my life, always working close to rats. Sent in a little emoji of a rat, so thanks for that, Andy. And other vermin. The only disease we were ever told about and checked for was leptospirosis, which is exactly the same symptoms. So I'm a bit dubious about what's being reported. I wouldn't trust anything the World Health Organization say. I'm with you on that last point, Andy. Thank you. Interesting. And this one is from Pete in Essex, talking about Michael O'Leary and the booze ban at airports. He said presumably Michael O'Leary and Ryanair would cease selling overpriced beer and wine on all Ryanair flights. He went, no, thought not. Yeah, very good point. And finally, all these foreigners, there's no name on that one, so I won't read that one up. Yeah, this is from Fern in Glasgow. How exactly did those Brits manage to get from the cruise ship at Cape Verde to their UK house to self-isolate without coming into contact with anyone? Beam me up and beam me back down, Scotty. I smell a rat. Well, no, they didn't go to Cape Verde. They got off at St Helena. But there's nothing to worry about anyway, Fern. Let's go to the phones. Let's talk to Lisa in Essex. Hello, Lisa.
Hello, Kev.
What would you like to say, Lisa?
I'm very excited to be speaking to you.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm excited to be speaking to you. Let's talk about migrants. What would you want to say?
Right, so about 5 years ago, I worked for local authority, Kev, and we had an Afghani resettlement programme. And then, lo and behold, what do we get? I think it was from the local authority migration team, sent to all of us a list of do's and don'ts.
Oh, yeah.
When you're with Afghanistani people,
oh, yeah, go on.
Take your shoes off, don't take your shoes off, accept food, don't accept food. Accept a drink, don't accept a drink. Shake hands, don't shake hands. On it went, Kev.
Well, I mean, that's ridiculous.
Telling us how to behave.
I would just say, Lisa, surely, the only thing you needed to know, which would be inherent to you, just be polite to them. You don't need all those instructions. Take your shoes off. We don't take our shoes off in this country, do we?
It was all cultural stuff, Kev. Now, I'm going to bet the farm. I don't know if you'll agree with me on this. I think you probably will. That I would bet the farm that we didn't give them a list saying this is what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
This is: do not rape our women and children. Do not loiter outside schools. I would bet.
Yeah, I bet you they didn't get that list. Yeah, I think you're exactly right. Listen, Lisa, it's really good to talk to you. The trouble is the show's coming to an end. But why don't you give me a call, or maybe tomorrow? Well, give me a call tomorrow. Have a proper chat. 0344 499 1000. But you knew that. That's Lisa in Essex making a very interesting point. Guess who's in the studio? It's only Peter Cardwell, and he's wiring himself up. He's going to be with us in just a second. Look at me filling time.
Getting myself attached to the Matrix.
Yeah, welcome to the Matrix. What's going to be on your show?
Blue pill or red pill? Lots to discuss this evening, including the civil servants office attendance scandal day 2.
50 days off a year.
Well, exactly, 50 days off a year. I'd love to have 50 days off a year.
I'd like to have a single day off.
Well, indeed, exactly. Abusing flexi time to claim all this time off.
Unbelievable, yeah. Totally
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the China spying scandal as well. Nearly 1.5 million migrants on benefits. There's